Chapter 204. Amidst the Sea Breeze. Soren looked at the female pirate who gradually swam to the shore, and then ordered the ghost ship to leave. As for whether the target would wait for him here, Soren was actually only 50% sure. In the beginning of the conversation, he had already added psychological hints to match the fear gaze and deliberately created an oppressive atmosphere. If this did not achieve the desired effect, it could only be said that he was not capable enough in this aspect. After all, he was not very good at everything. The ghost ship began to speed up, and the fog moved with the broken hull. Soren gradually approached the area of the deep sea. When the sea and sky in front of him became more and more open, and the sea gradually turned from blue to dark blue, he already knew that he had arrived at the territory of the Nagas. The Nagas were not the rulers of the sea. There were many dangerous creatures in the sea of this world. Even the shark men and the Naga sirens could only occupy a part of the territory. There were many sea monsters, especially in the abyss area, near the sunken continental shelf, where the Naga sirens did not dare to easily set foot. Because there was very strong energy radiation there. This was a disaster left over from the Arcane Empire. Even after thousands of years, it had not changed. The central area of the sea was a dangerous area. The octopus there could grow to the size of the Squid King, which could reach a length of about 14 meters. It was possible to overturn a ship directly. Occasionally, there were giant monsters that could prey on whales. Therefore, the transoceanic continent trade had always been in a cold storage period. Although some people had explored the continental shelf in the transoceanic area, it was only limited to the communication between spellcasters. Ordinary people could not pass through, and they could not bypass that dangerous area. The continental shelf plate would move slightly. The Soros Islands were also part of the continental shelf. Soren was now in the area of the deep sea canyon. Below was an abyss tens of thousands of meters deep. He did not know what was in it. Anyway, the Naga sirens lived near this sea area. Rumble. There was a slight vibration at the bottom of the sea, and then a strange warship that looked like an elven ship emerged. It was a long and narrow boat. Its front end was very sharp, and there was a sculpture of a Naga siren at the back. There were many Naga sirens on the boat, and one of them was someone Soren had seen before. The figure of the Naga siren priest was also among them. Unlike the past, she was wearing blue armor, and her 4 arms were holding a long sword, a mace, a staff, and a shield at the same time. Although she didn't have the casting ability of a legendary priest, her own creature level and priest level were definitely at the legendary level. Her priest level should be around 18. She was equipped with heavy armor and a shield. If Soren didn't know her identity, he would have mistaken her for a warrior. Priests in this world were difficult to deal with. They did not have as many restrictions as wizards. Wearing full body armor would not affect the casting of divine spells. High-grade priests could wear heavy warrior equipment and cast spells as they fought. From time to time, they could even cast a divine blessing on themselves. After entering the legendary realm, they could even summon an oracle from another world. Sometimes, you would feel helpless against such an existence. Fortunately, divine spells were the weakened version of spells. Priests were strong in overall ability, but they were not particularly outstanding. Moreover, it was almost impossible for priests to have the opportunity to become a god. At most, they could reach the level of the chosen saint. Follow. Soren ordered the ghost ship to follow. The Naga sirens seemed to be using alchemy warships. Although alchemy was listed as a taboo in many places, the Naga sirens did not have so many concerns. Warships were the main tool of the Naga sirens. They could not domesticate sharks, whales, and other sea creatures like the shark men, so using a warship was definitely faster than swimming. A day passed quickly. The next day, when Soren finished memorizing the spells, they met another helper. It was the shark men riding huge tiger sharks. They were the most loyal servants of the sea goddess. Unfortunately, these guys had low intelligence, and there were very few priests and spellcasters. Under the blue sky, a wave appeared on the sea, and then more than 10 tiger sharks appeared in front of them. In front of Soren were the shark men wearing armors that looked like woven seaweed. They almost only had the outline of a humanoid creature. Their thick arms held tridents. After approaching the warship, they roared loudly, and then the tiger sharks began to surround them. At the same time, a shark man drove the tiger shark close to the Naga siren priest. The shark man said something in a language that Soren could not understand at all. Damn the language of the sea. Sure enough, no matter how much one learned, one would never complain about learning too many languages. The Naga siren priest's expression became serious. After listening to the sharkman's words, she immediately ordered, "Full speed ahead. Our prey has appeared. There are other hunters." The ghost ship began to speed up. Soren did not know if it was an illusion, but he seemed to see the sea shake. No, no, no. It should not be said that it was the sea. It should be said that the whole sea seemed to shake. It was as if an invisible vibration spread on the bottom of the sea, and then caused a ripple to spread on the surface of the sea. The Naga siren priest also seemed to feel something. Her expression quickly became serious. She picked up a conch-like object and prayed in a low voice in a strange language. This voice was like a wave, spreading towards the sea with a strange sound wave, and then transmitted to a distant place. Gosaru. 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 There were Naga siren warriors roaring in front of them, as if they were shouting the name of some creature. Unfortunately, Soren could not understand at all. However, he now had a very clear feeling that this battle was not going to be simple. Basically, he was sure that it was above legendary. Time passed little by little. Wooden barrels and broken pieces of wood could gradually be seen on the sea. At the same time, there were traces of fire. It seemed that there had been a battle here before. The smell of blood attracted sharks and other marine carnivores. The shark men drove the tiger sharks to howl excitedly, and then with some casting movements, some of the sharks began to move with them. This was charm sea creatures. A spell similar to charm animals, which belonged to the sharkman's natural spell-like ability. Corpses began to appear in front of them. Soren saw a white bone flag floating on the sea, which made his expression a little ugly. He murmured, "The flag of the Pirate King?" This was a war flag. Or a war flag that had undergone a blood sacrifice. There had been a battle in the nearby sea area. They were still a lot late, but they did not know if the betrayer's fleet had been taken down. Soren did not care much about the wealth, because he could not get much even if he robbed them. But he had to come, otherwise he might be cursed by the sea goddess. Although the gods had fallen into a deep sleep and lost contact, they were not completely unconscious. For such an important thing, the sea goddess would definitely pay attention to it. Buzz. The vibration of the bottom of the sea seemed to appear again. The fish around seemed to be frightened and fled desperately into the distance. Even the sharks began to become uneasy. An isolated island appeared in the distance. It looked like a cliff that suddenly protruded from the bottom of the sea. It looked very strange from this position, and it made people feel inexplicably uneasy. In front of them was the outermost part of the Soros Islands. There were many strange islands scattered in this sea area. These islands were the products of the War of the Arcane Empire. They were a bit like mountains that had been destroyed. Roar. A dull roar suddenly came from afar. Then a huge black shadow rose into the air. It elegantly spread its dragon wings, circled from the sea, and rushed directly to a height of hundreds of meters. Then, the black figure swooped down from the sky. There was a dull sound of gunfire behind the island in front of them, and then a dragon's breath swept down from the sky, turning into a flame pillar that was 20 or 30 meters long and covering the sea. Black Dragon. Soren silently clenched his curved sword and turned to look at the Naga siren priest. He guessed right, the dragon could not resist the temptation of this amazing wealth. Rumble. A huge sound came from the front. Soren vaguely seemed to see a woman in a white dress. Maybe it was not a white dress, but it looked a bit like a wedding dress. The reason why it was so eye-catching was because of a pair of huge dark red dragon wings behind the woman, so it was very visual. What was even more incredible was that she was actually fighting the black dragon head-on. And it was a hand-to-hand fight. What spellcaster in this world could fight a dragon head-on? There was no doubt. There was only one kind of existence that could do this, and that was the dragon disciple. In front of him was a legendary dragon disciple. She had completed the transformation of a half-dragon, so a pair of dragon wings could be formed on her back. A legendary spellcaster with the power of a half-dragon, the woman in front of him should be the legendary Duchess. He did not expect her to have the blood of a red dragon. The bottom of the sea seemed to shake again. Forward. Sink. Soren and the Naga Siren priest gave two completely different orders. The Naga Siren worship began to accelerate suddenly. The Naga Siren priest's hands quickly cast spells. As she chanted, an elemental ripple appeared on the sea, and then a quasi-legendary giant water elemental appeared. The elemental creature stood on the sea and began to move with the warship in front of it. However, the ghost ship under Soren's control began to descend. In the sea water that came from all directions, the undead on the ghost ship were also ready to fight. It seemed that they were not early nor late. Chapter 205. The ghost ship gradually sank to the bottom of the sea. Soren activated the special emblem on his body and solidified his ability to breathe underwater. The drowned stood on the deck with his weapon, surrounded by wraiths. The ghost ship slowly approached from the bottom of the sea. The Naga warships in front had begun to join the battle. Many of the Naga warriors jumped into the water and swam toward the warships in front of them. There were many ships in the battle. In addition to the warships of the Betrayer's Chamber of Commerce, there seemed to be other pirate forces. Summon thunder. There seemed to be a dull sound of thunder on the sea, and then dark clouds gradually covered the sky. In the blink of an eye, it was dark all around. Bolts of lightning danced like electric snakes. Even Soren, who was sneaking under the sea, could feel the violent thunder and lightning. This was not a simple spell, but the thunder and lightning summoned by the Storm Lord's priest. This was a spell that was close to the 9th tier. It covered an area of more than 10 kilometers and almost covered the entire sea. Is this the Storm Lord? Or the Storm Priest? Soren felt a small current on the bottom of the sea. It was a bit like an electrostatic field, but the range was larger than what he had seen before. There should be a strong person above the legendary level. Heavy rain soon fell from the sky, and a terrible storm seemed to be brewing. The spellcaster forcibly changed the nearby climate and turned this place into the eye of the storm. Huge waves were set off on the sea, and the hovering black dragon seemed to be a little unstable. Soren was a little better at the bottom of the sea, but he could see that the hull on the sea was shaking violently. Storm lightning. Crackling lightning bolts fell one after another, and then some charred corpses could be seen falling into the sea. Among them were the Naga guards who were killed by lightning, and the shark men who rode on the tiger sharks. Soren could not help but feel lucky that he had just made the decision. If he rushed up recklessly, he might have been struck by lightning. The situation on the battlefield seemed a bit strange. No one on the warship that summoned the storm seemed to attack the Betrayer's Chamber of Commerce. It seemed that they had reached some kind of agreement. These people who looked like pirates and storm priests actually helped them resist the attacks of the Black Dragon and others. Could it be that the Chamber of Commerce has promised some benefits? Soren's expression did not look good. He ordered the Spectre ship to approach from the bottom of the sea. His life was the most important thing in this battle, and he did not want to die in a place like this. There seemed to be several figures flying across the surface of the sea. They were female Amazonian warriors wearing leather armor and holding spears. They were the main force of the Amazons. These women could be seen running on the surface of the sea under the blessing of some storm-like spells. At the same time, they held their spears and rushed towards the enemies in front of them. What a powerful battle strength! Soren closed his eyes and sensed his surroundings. He murmured, "There are at least 30 or more advanced professionals, and more than 5 legendaries. Let them fight for a while." Looking at the battle on the surface of the sea from the bottom of the sea was very awkward. Even if Soren had dark vision, what he saw was completely distorted. The black dragon in the sky seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. It could not help but roar angrily. It opened its mouth and spat out a dragon's breath. The HP of an adult dragon could reach more than 500 points. Many times, it seemed that they were seriously injured, but in fact, it was just a minor injury. The regeneration ability of the dragon was not just for show. Dragon Wing Strike. The move that Soren was most afraid of seemed to be used by the black dragon. For a moment, the wind on the surface of the sea was fierce and angry. Under the terrible power, 3 warships were directly overturned. On the spot, they were upside down. Many figures could be seen falling into the sea. This made Soren's eyes light up. As if he had thought of something, he ordered, "Those who are not drowning, go up. Sink all those warships for me. Motherf *****. I can't beat you on the surface, so I'll get you all down for me." Soren did not believe that those professionals who fell into the sea would be much stronger than him. After all, he had the underwater breathing emblem. The figure of the undead began to move. The ghost ship gradually rose a little. There were many pirates and guards on the surface of the water. Just now, the black dragon was furious and overturned several warships. Dozens of enemies fell into the sea at once. Soren already had a plan in mind. He immediately let the ghost ship rise. At the same time, he pulled out his curved sword and said in a deep voice, "Activate the ropes." Swoosh! The ropes on the ghost ship flew out. Don't underestimate this ghost ship. It was also a quasi-legendary level living creature. The ropes on the ghost ship were very long. After Soren gave the order, they immediately flew out. These ropes could fly out dozens of meters or even hundreds of meters. They looked like living tentacles. Under Soren's order, the ropes quickly wrapped around some of the enemies that fell into the sea. Then, they tightly wrapped around them and slowly dragged them into the sea. Then, 5 or 6 pirates were slowly dragged over. Even if someone used a sword to cut them, they could not break these tough ropes in a short time. Is this considered catching people's heads? Soren was unexpectedly in a good mood. He pulled out his curved sword and walked over. After the ropes dragged the enemies over, he directly killed those who were entangled with the ropes. Many of the pirates were close to the 3rd grade. Although they were around level 10, they could not fight at all in the sea because of the ropes. Soren was now like collecting heads. He quickly killed more than 10 enemies and received nearly 10,000 slaughter EXP. More and more people fell into the sea. It seemed that the pirate kings near the Soros Islands had also joined the battle. The battle on the surface of the water was already very intense. The rumbling of thunder, the roars of black dragons, the crackling of lightning spears, countless high-level spells, and many elementals were summoned. Soren could not see clearly what was happening on the surface of the water, but his business underwater was not bad. So many pirates fell into the sea, and he easily killed a large number of them. With the quasi-legendary level ghost ship as his backup, he was quite relaxed under the sea. Blood gradually spread. Faintly, the sea seemed to shake again. This time, Soren felt it very clearly because he was in the sea. He could be sure that some kind of power was spreading out. Suddenly, a golden light appeared in front of Soren's eyes. No, no, no. It was not the golden light, but the golden sand that fell from the sky into the sea. The battle on the surface of the sea was extremely intense. The others could no longer completely protect the 5 cargo ships that were filled with gold, silver, and jewels. One of the ships was hit and exploded. Broken pieces of wood flew in all directions, and gold and jewels were scattered all over the sky. One of the heavy and huge boxes was blown away. In the overwhelming wind, more than 300 kilograms of golden sand was swept away. Lightning flashed across the sky, and the golden sand emitted a dazzling light. Then, like a golden curtain falling from the sky, it all fell into the sea. Pieces of golden sand scattered in the sea. Under various strange lights, and gradually spreading in the blood, it emitted a dazzling and demonic light. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! A series of curses were heard. The black dragon's pupils suddenly became much redder. It roared and spat out a dragon's breath again. More than half a ton of gold had been scattered in the battle just now. Many tiny grains of gold and small pieces of gold had all fallen into the sea. There was a turbulent undercurrent in the sea, and in the blink of an eye, a lot of gold had been washed away. Those grains of gold had fallen into the sea, and in the end, it would be very difficult for anyone to obtain them. Gurgle. One after another, other gold, silver, and jewelry fell into the sea. In the middle of the sunken cargo ship, a dazzling golden light suddenly appeared. It was a throne that weighed more than half a ton and was completely made of gold. This heavy throne was inlaid with all kinds of jewelry. Just a glance at it was enough to show how amazing its value was. It seemed that a guy who valued money more than life desperately grabbed it, but the huge weight dragged him directly to the bottom of the sea. The heavy golden throne made Soren's eyes blur for a moment, but he soon woke up and quickly ordered the ghost ship to move elsewhere. Sure enough, a huge black shadow suddenly swooped down from the sky. The black dragon gave up the enemy in front of it and rushed down from the sky. It stretched out its dragon claws and grabbed the golden throne. The weight of half a ton was still bearable for the dragon. It flapped its wings and flew up again. It's mine. The black dragon opened its mouth and let out a dull roar. Osaks can give up the other treasures, but this treasure must be mine. Osakos will not return empty-handed. Give it to me, and Osakos will give up the other treasures. It seemed that it was also injured. Otherwise, with the black dragon's greed, it would not be satisfied with just one treasure. Because of its words, the others obviously slowed down their attacks a little. It seemed that some people hoped that it would leave after taking such a treasure. After all, this was only one of the ships. In the center of everyone's fight, there were 4 such cargo ships, almost each of which was filled with more than several tons of gold, silver, and jewelry. The golden sand that had just been scattered had already made many people jealous. If they didn't have any scruples in the end, who knew how many treasures would have sunk into the sea? Those large treasures were still fine, but the rest would be washed away by the seawater to who knew where. Gold and silver jewelry, gold and silver utensils, gold sculptures, jewelry, and jadeite. A large tribe, from the leader of the nobles to the civilian merchants, had all been massacred by the treacherous Chamber of Commerce. This amazing wealth was only the tip of the iceberg. The black dragon seemed to really only intend to take this one. But reality ruthlessly dragged it into the sea. A huge tentacle suddenly stretched out from the dark bottom of the sea, and then wrapped around the black dragon's body and dragged it directly into the depths of the sea. It's all mine, a strange and dull voice sounded, mixed with a little bit of demon language syllables. There were very few people present who could recognize these syllables, and even Soren only felt that the pronunciation was a little strange. The huge tentacle had an incredible and terrifying power. Even an adult black dragon could not break free from its shackles. Just like that, it was directly dragged into the sea with the golden throne, and gradually sank at a very fast speed. The battlefield was dead silent. It seemed that this power had shocked many people, and even the legends present temporarily stopped attacking. Tentacles with suction cups suddenly stretched out from the darkest depths of the sea. Vaguely, one could see an incomparably huge shadow appearing near the battlefield. It was a very terrifying oppressive force. The powerful professionals present who could resist the dragon's aura felt incomparable fear under this oppressive force. Soren seemed to have thought of something. His face was slightly pale, and he almost squeezed out a bitter smile with difficulty, murmuring, "What a crow's mouth. It's really happening. This monster has really appeared. Ghost ship, turn around. Quickly turn around. Leave here. Leave here quickly." A terrifying shadow appeared. It approached them from the deepest bottom of the sea, and hundreds of tentacles covered the battlefield. Chapter 206. It finally appeared. Some old memories appeared in Soren's mind, not only about the deep-sea monster in front of him, but also some memories about the bottomless abyss. Dagon. The king of the deep sea. The demon of the abyss. The ancient demon lord. The lord of the 89th floor of the abyss, shadow deep sea, one of the few ancient demon lords in the entire multiverse. It was the lord of the ocean's shadow, the sea, and sea monsters. As one of the most powerful demon lords, Dagon lived in a trench called Ishur, in the sea of the abyss. It looked like a hybrid of fish, mollusks, and eels. It had a large number of very powerful tentacles on its body. Its emblem was a big mouth full of sharp teeth wrapped by 6 spiral-shaped tentacles. For a long time, the children of Dagon were like the sinister devil fish and the terrifying deep ones. They often dived into the sea of the main material world under its instructions to be its priests. In the mortal world, Dagon's cult was popular in the coastal areas. Its human followers or swamp giants, tidal giants, etc., mated with half-fish creatures, and at the cost of tainting their bloodline, the demon lord gave them great power, rich fishing, and strange treasures. The black shadow in front of him was the son of Dagon. Son of Dagon, greater demon, demon god's heir, giant otherworld creature, basic health, 25, race, deep sea demon, attributes, strength 35, dexterity 12, constitution 32, intelligence 18, wisdom 20, charm 12, alignment, chaotic evil, level, deep sea demon level 20, demon god's priest level 10, demon god's heir, HP, 600 plus 600 plus, ability, unknown, divinity, none, divinity, lesser divinity, others? A series of data appeared in Soren's mind. In the past, this monster was notorious in the ocean. It had been sealed by the incarnation of the goddess of the ocean several times, but it still managed to escape successfully. It wreaked havoc on the west coast and the south coast for a long time, and almost no one could kill it. It was not until the Avatar crisis that its traces gradually disappeared. Some said that it had died in the hands of the goddess of the ocean, some said that it had died in the hands of the Storm Lord, and some said that it had returned to the abyss. Anyway, no one was sure of the final result. Soren began to retreat with all his might. The son of Dagon in front of him was a demigod species. It was much stronger than the demigod vampire. Even if the demigod vampire had the form of a god, it would still be defeated in the sea. Soren would be affected by the deep sea domain even if he were to get close to it, let alone exchange blows with it. He did not even have the ability to make a move. It could be said that everyone present was no match for the son of Dagon. At most, they could only fight with its tentacles. However, these tentacles were only a part of its huge body. Its true killing move was not these tentacles. Roar. A painful howl came from the bottom of the sea, and then a black shadow rushed out. The black dragon was not dragged into the mouth of the son of Dagon, but escaped at some cost. Anyway, when it rushed out of the sea, it was very embarrassed. Its whole body was covered in blood, and there were very obvious traces of corrosion on its solid dragon scales. The blood of the son of Dagon was very toxic and corrosive. As long as an ordinary weapon was cut on its body and stained with its blood, it would immediately corrode quickly. The black dragon almost did not dare to look back. It did not look like a legendary dragon at all. It looked more like a stray dog. The other legendary professions present looked terrible. The Naga Siren priest, who was fully armored, also looked terrible. Because it had been sealed by the incarnation of the goddess of the ocean, it was obvious that some of its tentacles had begun to attack them, and the other tentacles had wrapped around the central cargo ship. Between the amazing wealth and the threat of life, the other legendary professions gave up fighting. They did not choose to deal with this monster together, but seized the time to grab as much as possible. Although the son of Dagon was very powerful, but they did not even have the ability to escape. The Duchess flapped the huge red dragon wings behind her and rushed into one of the cargo ships, ready to take away as much treasure as possible. She was only a legendary sorcerer, not a legendary wizard. Only high-grade wizards, profession level 25 and above, could have a half-plane, which was almost equivalent to the divine kingdom of a weak god. The effect of the spatial storage in this world was limited. At most, she could only take away a part of the wealth. Legendary professions naturally had higher-level storage items. Compared to Soren's poor 3-foot multidimensional bag, they could undoubtedly take away a lot of wealth. In almost a moment. The legendary professions who stopped fighting nearby took away wealth worth tens of thousands of Kindler coins. Even so, the remaining 4 cargo ships still had a huge amount of gold, silver, and jewelry. This time, the wealth brought back was more than 500,000 Kindler coins. Soren estimated that it was more than that. If the silverware, silver Kindler, and silver sculptures were included, these 5 cargo ships were filled with at least 700,000 to 800,000 or even 1,000,000 Kindler coins. Even if these legendary professions tried their best, they could only take away about 300,000 to 400,000 Kindler coins. These riches all had weight. In this world, it was impossible to have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Kindler coins. 20 to 30,000 Kindler coins weighed nearly half a ton. The carrying capacity of the legendary professions was not that high, and the effect of the spatial storage items was limited. Even if all the wealth was smelted into gold and silver bars, it would still be a large volume, not to mention that most of them were all kinds of gold and silver. Creak. Rumble. The nearby ships were dragged to the bottom of the sea, and the huge tentacles destroyed many warships. Soren could see a lot of gold, silver, and jewelry scattered. Among them, a box full of Kindler coins was scattered. Thousands of Kindler coins floated in the sea and sank. There were also all kinds of jewelry, necklaces, and emerald jewelry. Gems the size of pebbles sank to the bottom of the sea, and even some gold and silver objects floated to where he was. These treasures would stay at the bottom of the sea nearby. If there were no accidents, the son of Dagon would stay here for a long time until all the treasures were transported back to its nest. Some people on the sea had begun to retreat. Although the Duke of Red Dragon's wife, who was wearing a snow-white dress, took away more than 100,000 Kindler coins, she still looked at the bottom of the sea with hatred. She was the one who lost the most among all. The female Amazons leaped to the rear. Their results were slightly less, but they probably also got more than 100,000 Kindler coins. They had already prepared the most valuable and easiest to take away, and the rest were more of the large gold and silver objects that took up space. No one could take away the wealth of 5 large cargo ships in one breath. Even if they had the strength of a legendary level, they could only salvage a little of the loss. The situation of the Naga siren priest on the sea was a bit worrying. At this time, no one would help her. The son of Dagon obviously hated the followers of the sea goddess more. But suddenly, there seemed to be a low roar in the distance, followed by continuous low roars. The sound became more and more intense. Soren could see another huge shadow on the bottom of the sea, approaching this side at an amazing speed. Gosaru. 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 Go. Saw. Lu. The surviving Naga warriors and shark men on the surface of the sea suddenly became excited. They roared as if they were calling a name. The Naga siren priest's face was excited. She picked up a conch-like horn and blew it. Woo woo woo. The desolate sound of a horn reverberated on the surface of the sea. Then, a huge shadow emerged from the bottom of the sea. A huge head that looked like a dragon emerged, followed by a second huge head, then a third, a fourth, and a fifth head, on the sea in the distance. A behemoth like a small island appeared. There were 7 heads on the surface of the sea, almost each of which was the size of a locomotive. There seemed to be 2 heads hidden in the sea. The huge body moved at high speed in the sea, and the surrounding sea water seemed to be pushing it forward. This was not the original ability of the creature, but more like a spell given to it by the gods. Around it were white waves, and huge sharks leaped out of the sea. The strong shark men held tridents and roared, following the island-like monster. Fight back. The Naga siren priest showed a grim smile, raised the scepter representing the sea priest, and roared, "Keep them. There are sacrifices for the sea goddess." Rumble. The nearby sea water suddenly broke open, and then the ghost ship rushed out from the bottom of the sea. Soren, who had planned to run as far as he could, stood in front of the rudder. The expression on his face was very brave, and he shouted, "Fire! Hurry up and fire! Sink those guys' warships!" At an unknown moment, Soren raised his hand and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and then murmured, "Damn it! You should have said earlier that you have help. I knew you could summon this horrible thing. Do I still need to run so desperately? You scared me." Chapter 207. Soren was not afraid of death. But he would never throw his life away. If he had no confidence in winning the battle, he would only run as far as he could. If it was only a legendary opponent, he could still fight back after transforming into a slaughterer. But the son of Dagon in front of him was the descendant of the demon god. It belonged to the demigod level, and it was in the opponent's territory. In the home field of the ocean, a quasi-legendary level deep-sea behemoth could be treated as a legendary monster. Even the incarnation of the sea goddess couldn't kill it. Soren didn't believe that these people were stronger than the incarnation of the sea goddess. But what he didn't expect was that the sea priest could even summon a pure-blooded hydra. That thing was something incredible. The legend of the hydra was spread across the multiverse. It was a species that covered all planes. In the material plane, the abyss, the elemental realm, the Bator Inferno, and so on, the figures of these species and their descendants could be seen. Even in the legends of the Middle Earth, there were legends about the hydra as early as the ancient times. But at that time, its name was Xianglu. Xianglu, a snake with 9 heads. It ate countless people. Wherever it went, it turned into a swamp. Xianglu's breath was poisonous. If one touched it, one would die. If one ate it, there was no cure. Xianglu's blood was highly poisonous. Not only did it poison all living things to death, but once it touched the ground, it would pollute everything. In the end, Xianglu was killed by Yu the Great. According to the legends, Yu the Great built a high platform to suppress it. The polluted ground was split into 3 pools. The hydra in the Western legends was no longer an example. The above words could actually be applied to the monster in front of him. The hydra in this world was extremely poisonous. Their breath was a dragon's breath, and their blood was highly poisonous. If the 9 heads didn't die, they could grow back again. Wherever the hydra wreaked havoc, it was easy to change the terrain into a swamp. At the same time, their blood would pollute the earth, making the land barren for a long time. A pure-blooded hydra was even more difficult to deal with than a giant dragon. There were 3 major branches of the sea monsters. The first branch was the tentacle, sea behemoth, which was the ancient demon Dagon of the abyss. It was the king of the sea monsters. The second branch was the multi-headed sea beasts. Their ruler was the mother of the hydra and the mother of the deep sea beasts, Hydra. The mother of hydras was a special demigod. Although it didn't have a clear clergy, it was a servant of the goddess of ocean. However, its main body wasn't in the material plane, but in the goddess of ocean's divine kingdom. As for the third major branch, Soren still liked to call them the dinosaur series. This series of sea monsters was the most dangerous and also the most powerful. Among them, the most representative was Godzilla. However, the natives of this world did not call it that. Godzilla was just a name that was spread among the players. The natives called this terrifying monster the Abomination. That was right. It was a living abomination. In a remote area outside the mainland, there was a god called the Father of Dinosaurs. He was a god with great divine power. He once had a conflict with the Storm Lord. He tried to create his own son of God. It was not a mortal bloodline like the son of Fear, but a son of God that was born from the combination of 2 gods. This kind of existence was born as a god. However, due to the restrictions of a certain law, it was very likely to die when it was born. If it died, then it would be the Abomination. This was the origin of the dinosaur series, Deep Sea Beasts. Although Soren joined the battle head-on, he had no intention of getting close to the son of Dagon. he would never enter the battlefield of the demigod sea monster. In order to ensure that there was enough distance between them, Soren deliberately let the pirates in front of him escape a little further, and then began to attack. The arrival of the Hydra undoubtedly attracted the absolute attention of the son of Dagon. In the face of the same level of the deep-sea beasts, it gradually retracted all of its tentacles. The shark men scattered to both sides, and the tiger sharks swarmed over in a circle. The Naga siren priest did not seem to want to stay in the center of the battlefield between the two sea beasts. Her original warship had been destroyed, and now she could only approach the ghost ship. Then she jumped onto the deck of the ship. Gosaru will deal with the son of Dagon. The Naga siren priest took a deep look at Soren, and then said in a deep voice, "We must leave the others here. There is an important sacrifice for the sea goddess." If Soren had not mentioned this monster, she might not have summoned the Hydra. However, it seemed that Soren was right. The shark men were still very powerful in naval battles, but it was difficult for them to sink those warships. The undead on the ghost ship began to move, and the dark sails swelled. Soren had activated the ghost sails on the ship. The ghost ship began to accelerate, shooting out like a sharp arrow, and soon caught up with the storm pirates who wanted to retreat. On the other side, the deep-sea Hydra had already fought with the son of Dagon. Its 9 heads took turns to bite off the hundreds of tentacles that wrapped around it. The blood that was extremely poisonous to others seemed to be a delicacy to the deep-sea Hydra. Its 6 heads dealt with the tentacles on the surface of the sea, and the other 3 heads dove into the water to attack. Waves of huge waves began to spread. The battle between the two supergiant deep-sea monsters set off huge waves that were dozens of meters high. It was like a city wall that slammed in all directions. Soren's move to retreat was undoubtedly correct. Some of the shark men were swept up by the huge waves, and even the tiger sharks flew hundreds of meters into the air. Don't think that you'll be fine after falling into the water. When these shark men fell into the sea, they had to endure a very difficult constitution test. Otherwise, they would have fainted when they hit the sea. A huge black shadow collided head-on. Both deep-sea monsters entered the bottom of the sea, and a wave of blood spread out. There was the blood of the son of Dagon and the deep-sea Hydra. Pieces of torn flesh spread in the sea, and huge waves surged in all directions. There were shark men and tiger sharks that were too close. Before they could escape, their bodies began to rot and be poisoned because of contact with the blood of the two deep-sea monsters. Soon, there were a few unlucky guys who died in the spreading blood. If one's strength was not at a certain level, even getting close to their fighting range was suicide, and sometimes they would die without knowing why. Test of death by poison. Stop it. The Naga siren priest seemed to be feeling something with her eyes closed. Then she suddenly opened her eyes and said in a sharp voice, "There. Fire. Sink it. Great whirlpool." Divine blessing, a burst of strange sea language sounded, and the Naga siren priest quickly chanted a spell. Then the sea in front of her suddenly began to rotate, forming a rather huge whirlpool that shrouded the nearby ships. The suction of the whirlpool made the ships unable to leave. Obviously, several high-grade figures flew out of it, abandoned the ship that was gradually being sucked into the whirlpool, and retreated to another position. This whirlpool had a very strong suction force. Even the dead man's voice was sucked into it, and little by little, it approached the center of the whirlpool. Fire. Fire. Soren did not have much fear in his eyes. He just lowered his voice and attacked. This was obviously a special magic of the sea goddess. It was useless for other ships to sink to the bottom of the sea, but for the ghost ship, it could come up again. Boom! The cannons of the dead man's voice began to attack. The boomerang on the side of the hull broke the mast of the other ship, and the other shot made a big hole in the cabin. Then many pirates could be seen jumping off the ship. Because the hull gradually cracked, the speed of decomposition under the suction of the whirlpool was getting faster and faster. The chances of them dying on the ship were higher. Plop! The Naga siren priest actually jumped into the bottom of the sea, as if there was something very important on the ship. Although Soren wanted to harvest the heads of the pirates, he was more curious about what the Naga siren priest cared so much about. So he also quietly jumped into the sea. Anyway, the battle was almost over. Those who had the ability to escape, such as the Storm Priest and the Duke of Red Dragon's wife, had already left. The spellcasters had already run away when the son of Dagon appeared. Now, only some of the more bitter close combat professions were left. The battle to determine the ownership of the wealth was between the son of Dagon and the Deep Sea Hydra. They were now just bystanders. Soren was very calm. Since he came to this world, this was not the first time he had been a bystander. If his strength had not improved fast enough, he would not even be qualified to be a bystander. It was strange. The suction of the whirlpool on the surface of the sea was very strong, but the bottom of the sea was much calmer. It was just rotating at a relatively slow speed. Maybe it was because this was not a natural whirlpool, but a divine spell given by the sea goddess. Soren saw the figure of the Naga siren priest swimming towards the wreckage of the ship. He seemed to feel something and swam in that direction, but he was tens of meters to the south. There was a force attracting him, as if it made him feel a thirst like hunger. Found it. Soren opened a box that was thrown far away by the whirlpool. There was a golden light in it. It was a golden sculpture as thick as a thigh. It seemed to be the bone of some kind of creature. No. No. This is not a golden sculpture, this is a bone. Soren looked at the strange golden bone in front of him. It looked like a toe bone, but what kind of creature could have a toe bone as thick as a thigh? When he reached out and touched the golden bone, a row of data suddenly appeared. Unknown divinity residue found. Activate divinity devouring ability. Divinity transfer. You have gained 1 divinity point. You have gained 1 divinity point. You have gained 1 divinity point. Chapter 208. What is this thing? The data in front of Soren's eyes jumped 3 times in a row, and he got 3 divinity points in one breath. As the data in front of him jumped, the light on the golden bone dimmed a little, and in the end, it was basically no different from ordinary gold. Soren didn't recognize this thing at all. He had never even seen it before, but it must be something related to the gods since it could give him divinity points. It could give him 3 divinity points at once, which was almost equivalent to a son of fear. This thing was definitely not small. Is it the corpse of a god from the astral world? Soren reached out and touched it, murmuring, "It seems that the corpse of a god from the astral world is not like this. A toe bone can give 3 divinity points. How many divinity points would this thing have if it was a complete human skeleton?" Greed. A trace of greed inexplicably appeared in Soren's heart. Although the divinity on it had been absorbed by him, he could still feel that there was another power on the golden bone, which was a power that he could not understand or absorb now. However, Soren was sure that this power was very powerful, and it almost involved the field of rules. This was definitely a terrible power that belonged to the gods. Soren tried to put it into the multidimensional bag. But something unexpected happened. The golden bone in front of him could not be put in at all. The multidimensional bag could not accommodate this kind of material. This situation was very rare because the multidimensional space could almost accommodate most things. The objects that could not be accommodated by the multidimensional space seemed to be some very special existence. The golden bone in front of him should be one of those special substances. Soren tried 3 times in a row, but neither the multidimensional bag nor the Battlemaster gloves could accommodate this golden bone. It seemed that the multidimensional space was isolated by this golden bone, and it could not be put into the multidimensional space at all. Gulp. There was a slight noise around, and then the cold face of the Naga siren priest appeared nearby. She clenched her spear and scepter in her hand, looked at Soren with cold eyes, and said in a deep voice, "Human. Give it to me. This is a sacrifice to the sea goddess." The other party's attitude was very cold. It seemed that if Soren did not give it to her, she would directly attack him. A hint of hesitation appeared on Soren's face. Then, he slowly withdrew his finger, stepped back a little, and said, I was just about to give it to His Excellency High Priest. The Naga Siren priest smiled with satisfaction, then quickly came to the golden bone. She couldn't help but reach out and touch the golden bone. Then her face became livid, and she said, "Those damn storm followers. They had actually stolen a portion of the power from above." But fortunately, the sacrifices needed by the goddess of ocean were still above. These damn guys must pay the price. The other party was very powerful. As a high-ranking priestess of the goddess of ocean, she naturally had the power to perceive divinity. There were also many priests with divinity, mainly concentrated on the chosen and saints. Some of the chosen and favored who were in preparation could also be bestowed with 1 or 2 points of divinity by the gods. The Naga Siren priest in front of him probably had a little bit of divinity on her, so she could summon the whirlpool. When she touched it, she found that the divinity on it had disappeared, leaving only another special power. The Naga Siren priest did not expect that it was absorbed by Soren, so she thought that the followers of the Storm Lord had taken some of the power from above. It seemed that someone was the scapegoat. Soren's heart was inexplicably relieved. No one would have thought that he could absorb divinity so quickly. The Naga Siren priest seemed to want to put the golden bone into the dimensional space, but she soon found that it was impossible, so she could only hold the golden bone upstream. The two soon returned to the ghost ship. The whirlpool on the sea had disappeared. In fact, it did not last long. There were many dead and unconscious pirates nearby. The powerful professions were still alive in such a shipwreck. Soren did not have the slightest mercy. He directly controlled the rope and began to harvest the heads and corpses. There was not only kindler on the corpses, but also 1 or 2 rare items. There was no doubt that rare items were naturally rare, and Soren did not have many rare items on him. However, Soren actually found 3 to 5 rare items from the corpses of these pirates. Most of them were found from enemies above grade 3, and pirates with a profession level of 10 or below did not seem to have anything good. Unfortunately, the level of these rare items was not high. All of them were rare grade 1 weapons, including rapiers, curved swords, and strange daggers. The best rare item was the Ring of Haste. Item type, Ring of Haste. Item grade, rare, grade 3, item description. This is a rare ring enhanced by alchemy. It is enchanted with special materials and contains the power of the wind element. After activating the power of this ring, the user can obtain the effect of the level 3 spell, Haste, which increases the speed of movement and attack for 10 minutes. Requirements, none. Effect, Haste, once a day. This equipment was not very powerful. However, it also had an advantage. It did not need to be recharged, and it would automatically restore the effect of the spell once a day. If it could only provide a single spell and the casting time was too short, this equipment should have reached the legendary level. There should be a lot of equipment under the sea, but it was very difficult to salvage them. At the beginning, the huge waves had washed away many corpses. The real top professions had basically escaped successfully, and most of the ones who died were the weaker ones. Set sail. After the Naga Siren priest returned to the ghost ship, she immediately said in a deep voice, "Return to the sea temple." This order made Soren stunned. The deep-sea hydra over there seemed to be still fighting with the son of Dagon. The recovery ability of the 2 deep-sea monsters was amazing, and it was possible to fight for a day and a night. But now that they had left, it seemed a little strange. Could it be that in the eyes of the Naga Siren priest, this golden bone was more important than hundreds of thousands of kindler? Sure enough, she did not tell him the truth at the beginning. It was not only the wealth that attracted her to fight for it. As if noticing Soren's expression, the Naga Siren priest glanced at him and slowly said, "The son of Dagon will not be defeated so quickly. The sacrifice to the sea goddess cannot have any accidents. Human. Your performance today is very good, and the sea goddess will give you the reward you deserve. Now our most important thing is to escort the sacrifice back." After that, she used some kind of spell and directly took over the command of the ghost ship. Then the Naga Siren priest issued some kind of summons, and the nearby shark men began to escort the ghost ship. They moved towards the location of the sea temple. The battle in the distance was still going on. The polluted sea water poisoned a large number of marine creatures, and even the seaweed gradually withered. The deep-sea hydra was also a disaster in the sea. Soren was silent. He did not ask much. Anyway, the purpose of his trip was to repay the sea temple for the greater restoration. It was also a good thing that he did not have to continue to fight. But he faintly felt that he seemed to be involved in something, and the sea goddess seemed to be planning something. Looking at their big battle today, it was impossible to not have the support of the gods behind them. Even a high-grade sea priest could not easily mobilize the deep-sea hydra. Only the gods could control such a terrible monster. Only the sea goddess could enslave such a terrible deep-sea monster. Soren began to calculate the slaughter EXP he had received. Along the way, he picked up a lot of heads, and added up to more than 30,000 slaughter EXP. This was still before he cut into the battlefield. If he could kill a quasi-legendary profession, he would get more slaughter EXP. Of course, the possibility of death would be higher. At the very least, when they returned, the Naga guards were almost completely annihilated, and a large number of shark men had also died. Almost 80% of the shark men above the high level had died, which meant that many shark men who came later had survived. The ghost ship gradually moved away from the battlefield. The Naga siren priest seemed to be a little wary of Soren. She said something to the nearby shark men in the sea language, and then the shark men began to return. At the same time, some of them went to the Naga siren kingdom. It seemed that they did not intend to give up those treasures. Soren's expression was very calm. He also picked up some gold and gems. In his heart, he did not expect to be able to swallow such a big treasure. Because only those with strength were qualified to compete for these things. A day passed quickly. Soren stood up when an island appeared in front of him. He glanced at the Naga siren priest next to him, bowed slightly and said, "Can you stop here? I need to pick up someone." The Naga siren priest frowned and said in a deep voice, "Pick up who?" Sauron hesitated for a moment before replying, "I'm here to pick up a woman, my spoils of war." The priest's face suddenly became a little playful. She looked up and down at Soren, and also looked at his lower body. After frowning for a moment, she said, "Okay. Come back quickly. I won't wait for you here for too long." Soren nodded. It was not until Soren's figure left that the Naga siren priest showed an inexplicable smile and murmured, "A woman? Sure enough, human males like to mate the most. Maybe I can try to win him over from other places. A near-legendary rogue has a lot of uses." Soren's figure gradually approached the coast. He glanced at the empty beach and could not help but show a trace of disappointment on his face. The female pirate was not waiting for him here. But when he was about to leave, there was suddenly some noise in front of him. Then Adele with long red hair appeared in front of Soren. There was a stubborn expression on her face as she walked towards him step by step. Soren finally showed a smile. Chapter 209. Outside the Sea Temple. Soren stood in front of the temple and waited silently. He arranged for Adele Isabel to go to the tavern. The next plan needed some help. Otherwise, the two of them couldn't even sail the ship. After the Naga siren priest came back, she entered the temple. Even the temple guards were ordered to stay outside. No one knew what she was doing on the ground. Soren was naturally not qualified to go in. He didn't want to know too much about the secrets of the sea goddess. The more he knew, the deeper he would be involved. That was how the silencing happened. As time went by, the divine power gathered around the sea temple suddenly vibrated. It was a very obvious feeling of vibration. The divine power around the temple surged like a tide. In this world, the believers provided the gods with the power of faith, and then the gods transformed the power of faith into divine power. This divine power was not all controlled by the gods. It also needed to be fed back to the believers. Most of it would stay in the temple. Therefore, any temple with a priest would have a divine aura. Otherwise, it would be an abandoned temple. The divine power would gradually decrease and dissipate. If the presiding priest was replaced, or the strength of the priest was very low, or the number of believers decreased, the divine power above would decrease little by little. Finally, the divine aura above the temple would be reduced by 1 or 2 levels. Upgrading the level of the temple not only required a large enough scale, but also a corresponding number of believers and influence in the surrounding area. There were a large number of temples scattered in this world, but more than 90% of them were at the level of temples. There were not many that could reach the level of a temple. Most of them were inside the city. The number of big temples was even fewer. Such a big temple was equivalent to half a wizard tower. After activating the divine power protection, there was no way to destroy it. Amber City was a typical example. If it weren't for the strong deterrence of the temple, the struggle between the gods would be even more intense. This was because many evil gods couldn't wait to kill the believers of the enemy gods at any time. If the temple in front of them was attacked head-on, it would be impossible to take it down without a regular legion. Even if it was taken down, the casualties would be more than 50%. The divine power began to gradually converge. It seemed that some unpredictable changes had occurred in the sea temple. Soren couldn't understand this change because he knew very little about divine power and magic. He didn't have enough knowledge to judge it. But he could feel the change, and he even noticed that the change was spreading towards the underground seawater below the sea temple. It was as if an invisible energy wave had enveloped the entire Port Tylon. Soren wasn't the only one who felt this change. All the guards in front of the shrine knelt on the ground and started praying. The other believers in Port Tylon also began to pray. The invisible wave of prayers turned into a powerful force of faith, causing the sea temple to emit an invisible but dazzling brilliance. This process lasted for quite some time. It also attracted the attention of many forces. The temple's power seemed to be gathering, and there were faint signs of a breakthrough. If the sea temple became a great temple, the sea goddess avatar would appear. This was a process of God's blessing. Every temple would appear when it was upgraded. At the beginning, the temple would be blessed with God's consciousness. Then, the upgraded temple would be blessed with God's power. The most iconic of these temples was the statue of God. The statue of God would have the God's consciousness imprinted on it. When the believers prayed, the God would be able to sense them. There should be no avatar now. The gods were all busy resisting the energy storm. But the sea temple in front of them had indeed been upgraded. It was estimated that it had become one of the few great temples in the coastal area. Many believers of the sea goddess began to gather here. The figure of the Naga siren priest slowly walked out. Soren didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the Naga siren priest in front of him had a divine aura. This aura was a bit like the chosen of the sea goddess, but there was still a big gap. It seemed that after she offered the sacrifice, she was rewarded by the gods. The gifts of the gods to the believers were a very important part of the consolidation of faith. The priest stood on the high platform in front of the temple, looking at the believers gathered in front of her. Then she turned her eyes to Soren and said slowly, "Human. Come in with me." Soren bowed slightly and walked into the temple. "You have done well." The Naga siren priest stood in front of the statue, holding the scepter representing the sea priest in her hand. She said in a strange and solemn tone, "You have punished those who have betrayed their faith. You have used blood and death to tell them the price of disobeying the goddess. You have also proved your loyalty. You have offered the sacrifice that the goddess wants. You should be rewarded." The Naga siren priest slowly walked in front of Soren, then raised her palm and said, "Kneel." Soren's expression did not show any hesitation. He just hesitated in his heart, and then he knelt on one knee in front of the statue of the sea goddess. He had actually experienced this step several times because this was the real blessing ceremony of the gods. To get the blessing of the gods, you must first express your humility and respect, and prove your value. Then you can get the blessing of the gods. The gods were not noble almsgivers. The blessing of the misfortune goddess was an accident. The mysterious woman looked as unpredictable as the misfortune goddess. The priests of the goddess of misfortune and the goddess of good fortune were both capricious and capricious. Very good. The Naga siren priest reached out and pressed on Soren's forehead. She said in a low voice, "Human. You have proven your value. You have used your strength and credibility to maintain the dignity and interests of the sea goddess. This is an admirable act, so you are qualified to get the blessing of the sea goddess." The scepter was gently placed on Soren's shoulder. Then the Naga siren priest leaned over and kissed Soren's forehead. She said in a strange sea language, "I bless you on behalf of the sea goddess. You will not be attacked by the sea monsters in the sea. You will be blessed by the sea goddess. The sea is your home. The waves and storms will stay away from you and your servants. You will become the sea goddess's favorite. You can use the power of the goddess to control the creatures in the sea." Divine power began to gather. The light of blessing appeared, and Soren's body seemed to be shrouded in a blue light. Vaguely, the statue of the sea goddess seemed to open her eyes. A line of sight fell on Soren's body, and then gradually disappeared. This was the power of the gods. From now on, Soren would become the sea goddess's favorite and the blessed one. As long as he did not actively attack the sea creatures, most of the sea creatures, including the Naga sirens, the shark men, the pirates, and so on, would not take the initiative to attack Soren and his companions. And he could also communicate and trade with these sea creatures because the sea goddess had blessed him. His identity was equivalent to the priest of the sea temple. This was a reward that was difficult to refuse, especially when Soren was preparing to develop in the outer islands. The light of the divine power gradually dissipated. A row of data appeared in front of Soren's eyes, and he had an additional background ability, Gift of the Sea Goddess, special ability. You have received the gift of the sea goddess through your own actions. From now on, you will greatly reduce your chances of encountering danger in the sea. Whether it is storms, waves, whirlpools, or all kinds of fierce and dangerous sea creatures, they will not easily take the initiative to attack you because of the blessing of the sea goddess. You or your fleet will be blessed by the sea goddess when sailing in the sea. You will have the opportunity to communicate and trade with other creatures that believe in the sea goddess. From now on, most of the sea creatures, including the sea monsters, will see you as neutral. And you have received a spell-like ability under the blessing of the sea goddess, which can be used to control other creatures in the sea. This was the most basic blessing. The blessing of the sea goddess did not increase the attributes by much, but it was equivalent to having an extra amulet in the sea. Moreover, it could also reward an additional spell-like ability. Dominate sea creatures, spell-like ability. You have the blessing of the goddess of the sea. You are the one who is favored by her, which allows you to mobilize a special power. You will be able to control most marine creatures. The effect of this type of spell is similar to seduction of marine creatures. The level of controlling normal marine creatures cannot exceed your profession level, and the level of controlling marine monsters cannot exceed half of your profession level. The difficulty of this spell is related to your charisma. Once per day. This was a special spell-like ability. It was equivalent to the unorthodox charms sea creatures, but the effect of the spell was stronger than the Sharkman's charm. It had a difficulty test, which was determined by charm. The level of ordinary sea creatures you can control cannot exceed Soren's level, and the level of special sea monsters you can control cannot exceed half of Soren's level. This was the power of the sea goddess. This was because charmed sea creatures could not control sea monsters. At most, it could control the level of sharks, whales, and giant octopuses. The blessing ceremony was completed. The Naga siren priest looked at Soren meaningfully and said slowly, "Human. Keep the awe of the sea goddess in your heart. She will not be stingy with the rewards she gives you. When you decide to give your faith to the sea goddess, she will give you more gifts." This was a blatant attempt to rope in. The main believers of the sea goddess were concentrated in sea creatures and coastal areas. The value of a quasi-legendary rogue was still amazing. After all, rogues were proficient in more means than other professions. Soren leaned over slightly and kissed the back of the priest's hand to express his humility. Because she represented the sea goddess at this moment, he said, I revere the power of the sea goddess and thank her for her generosity. When the sea goddess needs me, I am willing to give my strength to her. This was not the language of delivering faith. It was a bit like a guest. It was more like a relationship of employment and employment. Many temples had such members. There was a slight dissatisfaction on the priest's face, and then it turned into a smile. She slowly said, "Very good. I hope you remember today's vow. When the sea goddess needs you, you will give your strength to the sea goddess. Otherwise, the sea goddess will take back her gift." The blessings of the gods were not so easy to get. Soren had known this for a long time. Otherwise, he would not have lost the blessing of the Queen of Spiders. However, since he could get it now, he naturally had to make good use of it. No one knew what would happen in the future. If something really happened, at most, he would not admit it. The age of turmoil was coming. He did not believe that the sea goddess would be bored enough to kill him over such a trivial matter. As for ordinary tasks, Soren would not be too resistant. Anyway, if he wanted to develop overseas, he could not do without the help of the church. With the sea temple behind him, even if he had to fight with the storm church, it would not be a problem. After all, the sea goddess was also a great divine power. Soren had her support. It was equivalent to directly entering the inner circle of all sea creatures. He did not even need special reputation recognition tasks. He could coexist peacefully with these sea creatures. When necessary, he could trade with them to make money. The most important thing in this world was still power. If he did not have the strength of a quasi-legendary, the Naga Siren priest would not have spent so much money to win him over. Now, the most important thing was to take advantage of this opportunity to accumulate more strength. Chapter 210. When Soren came out of the sea temple, the other people's attitude towards him was completely different. The temple guards who used to ignore him were now bowing slightly to him to show respect. These were warriors who served the gods. Their task was to guard the sea temple. Unless there was any special situation, only the Naga Siren priest could mobilize them. These were the formal armed forces of the temple. Sometimes they would replace local laws and act according to the rules of the temple. Soren was now labeled as a member of the sea temple. Anyone who wanted to deal with him had to consider the power of the sea goddess, but power also meant obligation. When necessary, Soren needed to serve the sea temple again. The sea goddess would not give him such a big gift for no reason. Soren did not have so many concerns. The sea goddess was different from other gods. She did not have so many enemies. In the sea, she was close to being the dominant one. Only the Storm Lord had some friction with her. As for other gods, unless they were involved in the sea, they would have an obvious hostile relationship with her. Otherwise, most of them were neutral. The sea goddess' biggest enemy was in the abyss, unlike other gods who had many enemies in the material plane. This was also one of the reasons why Soren accepted it after consideration. At least he would not have a bunch of enemies just because he accepted the blessing of this god. One must know that the favored ones were very popular with hostile believers. They were happy to kill the favored ones of the hostile gods. This could be exchanged for a high-level sacrificial ceremony. Soren went to see Vivian. The little girl was still asleep, but when she felt Soren's arrival, she relaxed a lot. Her consciousness could perceive the outside world, but she could not wake up for the time being. Soren sat by the bed and stroked Vivian's hair. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. Then he began to prepare a lot of things. Now that he got the blessing of the sea goddess, he could speed up the pace of his plan. But the most important things now were two. The first was to absorb divinity to strengthen his own power and get a little more divinity as soon as possible to improve his attributes. The second point was to support Adele to become the leader of the pirates near Shipwreck Bay, and use her power to build a fleet and get the background ability, Slaughterer. At this time, he had the ability to try to devour the divinity of fear, and Vivian might be able to wake up. Night fell. Soren put away the complicated magic scroll and stretched his neck. Then, He took off his clothes and pulled Vivian into his arms. The little girl's breathing seemed to be more relaxed. Soren smiled and kissed her lovely cheek, murmuring, "You'll be able to wake up soon. It won't take long. When we have our own forces, we can invade the outer islands." At that time, you can also rely on the power of the elemental spirit to strengthen your divinity. This way, no matter how much divine power of fear there is, you won't be affected by the will of the Dread Lord. Outer Islands. Population, wealth, power. Here, he and Vivian could get a source of divinity, and it was even possible to cultivate the first batch of believers. If Soren's plan was successful, he could provide Vivian with a better foundation. At that time, even if she had to fight against the demigod vampire, Vivian would have no problem. Whether it was the Son of Fear or the Abyss Lord, no one could stop the rise of Vivian. The path of the gods. Vivian was undoubtedly more talented than him. She had more room to grow than Soren. After all, Soren needed to climb up step by step from a mortal. The sky had just brightened. Soren's figure appeared near the port. In front of him was the serious-looking Adele Isabel, and the sailors and pirates she recruited last night. As the daughter of the former pirate leader, she naturally had her own channels. It was undoubtedly easy to recruit some people. After all, she was familiar with the channel since she was a child. Port Tylon also had a sufficient source of manpower. However, the people she recruited could only serve as sailors in Soren's view, because most of them were ordinary people. Or rather, strong ordinary people. Some of them were missing arms and legs. Soren did not have any expectations for the people he recruited overnight. He just looked at them coldly and then said, "Let's go. We don't have much time." If he wanted to rise in a short period of time, he naturally needed to rely on the power of the Sea Temple. Although Soren could not continue to control the dead man's voice, he borrowed a warship from the Sea Temple. His first step was to get the ship back, and then directly attack the other pirates in Shipwreck Bay, using the simplest and most violent way to quickly improve his strength. These sailors in front of him would soon be eliminated. Soren was very clear about what kind of things pirates were. These guys were all wretched bones. They were the typical type of people who could be bullied but not bullied. As long as your fist was big enough, they would know what was called reverence and humility. As for those who were disobedient, Soren would never be soft-hearted when harvesting their heads. Half a day passed quickly. The people recruited by Adele immediately came into use. Seeing another pirate ship undoubtedly made these guys, who were muddling along at the bottom, a little excited. Some familiar people even whispered to each other. One night, Adele had no way to establish authority in the eyes of these people. "Captain." A fierce-looking pirate who was missing 3 fingers glanced at Adele's full breasts with a rather obscene gaze, and then laughed mischievously. "Now we have 2 ships. What should we do next? Should we rob some fat sheep that are easy to deal with?" This was an old pirate. He had been around for a long time, so he had established a little prestige. It seemed that there were still his helpers here. When he spoke, many others began to respond, as if he was the captain. This guy was obviously a little proud, and he looked at Soren provocatively. It seemed that Adele didn't say much when she recruited them. This made Soren more satisfied. He didn't need these trash pirates to know who he was, as long as they respected him. Adele's face was a little ugly, and her gorgeous face showed a trace of anger. She pressed her hand on the hilt of her sword and said in a deep voice, "We're going to Snake Island." The captain had the dignity of a captain. This dignity didn't necessarily require mercy, but it certainly required awe. She hadn't been able to make the pirates in front of her understand awe. "What?" The fierce-looking pirate's face changed dramatically, and he said in an incredulous tone, "Are you crazy? That's Narwhal's territory. We'll be eaten up in the blink of an eye. Hee hee. Maybe you'll be caught by them. TSK TSK. Captain, I know you want to restore the glory of the Tigeshark. But you'd better consider your own strength. When we have enough wealth and manpower, we'll consider annexing other pirates. The other party's tone became unfriendly, and there didn't seem to be much respect. The other sailors and pirates on the ship also seemed to have ugly expressions. As old foxes, they naturally knew what kind of place Snake Island was. With their mediocre strength, going there was simply suicide. Soon, there were people who began to make noise. More than 70% of the pirates were questioning Adele's orders, and only a few people looked on coldly. Among them, a young man who seemed to be half-elven looked deeply at Soren, and seemed to find that Soren's strength was the most powerful. He was the real leader. Adele's expression became cold, and she pulled out her weapon, as if she was ready to use blood to maintain her prestige as a captain. However, Soren was faster than her. Soren gently raised his finger, and several arcane missiles appeared at his fingertips. Then, he saw the fierce pirate in front of him fly out, and there was a bloody hole in his chest. To deal with this kind of trash, he could kill him with one arcane missile. Wizard. Wizard. On the pirate ship, there were sounds of cold air being sucked in, and the deterrence of a spellcaster was revealed in an instant. Even Adele's beautiful face was full of shock, because when Soren subdued her, he didn't use any spells. Only now did she know that Soren was actually a wizard. She had always thought that Soren's invisibility was due to the use of a magic scroll or some special tool. She never thought that he was also a wizard, and it seemed that his profession level wasn't low either. Thud thud thud. Soren was wearing a dark red cloak, and the others couldn't see his appearance clearly. However, this didn't affect his deterrence at all, and there was also an unknown fear in their hearts. He swept his gaze over the people in front of him, and there seemed to be great fear in his eyes. It actually made many people tremble slightly, and some even took a step back in fright. His expression was cold and dignified, and he directly walked in front of the fierce pirate who was still breathing, and then stomped on his head. Red and white splattered everywhere, and the strength of this stomp shook the deck, and traces of cracks appeared on it. Soren stopped. He frowned as he looked at the blood and brain matter on his shoes. Then, he coldly glanced at the others. Finally, his eyes fell on the silent young half-elf. He slowly said, "From now on, you are the first mate of this ship." There wasn't too much nonsense. Soren frowned and looked at the group of trash in front of him, and said in a deep voice, "I will cut off the head of the narwhal and plunder the wealth of Snake Island. Those who follow me will be rewarded, and the others can go to hell. Set sail. Set sail. Anyone who doesn't listen to orders will end up like him." Soren wasn't in the mood to waste too much time and energy on these trash, and if they didn't listen to orders, he would just kill them all. After all, their role was just to set sail. Chapter 211. Recover Energy, update at the end of the month, looking for recommendation tickets. Soren returned to the cabin. He was not interested in wasting too much time on these pirates, because they were only part of the plan. The real backbone of Soren's strength could not be these pirates who had become old foxes. Just as good soldiers could not become veterans, these guys had long been used to sailing according to the wind, and were basically unreliable at critical moments. Soren frowned and picked up a cloth to wipe off the blood and brains on his boots, then turned to look at Adele, who was his assistant in controlling these pirates. If she couldn't do this well, he was afraid that he would have to change her in the future. A row of data appeared in front of him: Sea Battle of the Betrayers, Civil Rumor. In the middle of November 1675 of the New Moon era, the Betrayer Chamber of Commerce plundered a large amount of gold from the indigenous people, so it attracted the competition of various forces. You helped the Sea Temple to take away important sacrifices. In this battle, you encountered the son of Dagon, the Deep Sea Hydra, the Storm Lord and other legendary creatures. The legend of the ghost ship, as a small number of survivors began to spread in the coastal area, the legend of the throat cutter also seemed to be connected to you. Legend level +3, legend level actually appeared only now? Was it because the survivors of the legendary sea battle only now spread the news, or because the son of Dagon and the Deep Sea Hydra had been fighting until now? Soren felt that it could be both. But since there was a rumor, the sea battle should be over. It seemed that the Sea Temple did get a lot of benefits, but he didn't know if they killed the son of Dagon. Soren felt that this possibility was not high, because it was too difficult to kill a giant sea creature. Some things were completely out of his ability. Soren was not interested in interfering too much. His main energy was now focused on dealing with the pirates. Famous pirates had accumulated a lot of wealth, and they basically had warships. There was a saying in the past that it was enough to kill a group of pirates to trade with the sea. This sentence had been spread in the tavern for a long time. Soren's first fortune would naturally come from these pirates. Basically, any pirate with a reputation would have a large ship that could cross the sea. Snake Island was an island surrounded by a group of snakes. It was originally a barren island, but it gradually developed due to the occupation of pirates. The pirates had built a stronghold here, and at the same time, it was their base camp and transit station. They were also involved in the smuggling trade. There had been many different owners here. The current pirate leader was Narwhal, a fierce and powerful guy. This guy had hundreds of people under his command, and he owned a warship as well as several fast boats. He was one of the fat sheep in this area. Kill him. Soren had the capital to build a fleet, and at the same time, he had the financial resources to conduct trade. The two pirate ships gradually moved towards Snake Island. Because there were no flags, they looked similar to merchant ships. Soren was resting in the cabin. After about half a day, he suddenly felt the hull of the ship shake, and then heard a loud roar from outside. Pirates. Enemy. Prepare for battle. You bunch of trash. Get ready for battle. Soren suddenly opened his eyes, and then came to the deck at an amazing speed. Adele was already standing at the bow of the ship, and next to her was the young half-elf who had just been promoted. The one who roared was also this young man, and it seemed that he had quickly adapted to his new identity. The pirates on the deck were a little flustered. These guys were all incompetent sailors, and the real experts had long been recruited by others. Including the guy that Soren had killed at the beginning, he was only about the strength of the second grade. It's Narwhal. A middle-aged pirate with only one ear shouted, and his voice was a little frightened. It's Narwhal's warship. He knew that we were going to deal with him, so he came to deal with us in advance. Soren heard this and frowned. He glanced at Adele next to him, and after noticing the other's shocked expression, he said coldly, "Shut up. They just happened to come and rob us." This was Narwhal's territory. His pirate ship owner was active nearby, robbing fleets on long voyages, and sometimes he would collect tolls. It seemed that they just happened to meet each other. They actually came to us. Soren narrowed his eyes slightly, jumped lightly and landed on the mast, and then looked at the pirate ship that was gradually approaching in the distance. There was a unicorn symbol on it. Only one warship appeared, and the others were fast ships that could only sail near shallow waters. There were a lot of people, dozens of people on the warship, and 40 or 50 people below, holding hooks and ropes in their hands. These were all prepared for battle. The pirates shouted excitedly, and seemed to have regarded Soren in front of them as a fat sheep. Whale! Whale! Someone shouted, and then the others were quiet for a moment. Then they heard the sound of someone even throwing away their weapons, and said with a crying voice, "It's Narwhal. He came in person. We give up resistance. Maybe he will let us go. Or everyone will be nailed to death by him." Bang! Soren frowned and glanced at the frightened guy, raised his hand and gently pointed, and sent out an arcane missile. A corpse fell to the ground just like that. There was a huge shadow under the sea, and it looked like it was close to 20 meters long. It was a kind of whale that Soren could not recognize. It looked a bit like a killer whale, but its breath was much fiercer, but it was not a sea monster. There was a huge sea creature in front of him, and it may have grown to its current size for some reason. Fly! Soren directly cast a spell, then glanced at Adele next to him and said in a deep voice, "Shut them up and get ready to fight." These guys were definitely unreliable. But at least they could not let the enemy take the warship directly. This group of trash had to resist and buy enough time for Soren. Adele nodded slightly and said, "Pick up your weapons. You bunch of trash. Get ready to fight. Cowards and softies. Hurry up and pick up your weapons. Or I'll cut off your heads." This woman had a fiery temper. Although Soren had subdued her, in the eyes of others, she had a fiery temper. Because she was also an Amazon woman. Soren's figure rose into the air, and at the same time, he cast invisibility on himself. For the time being, he could not use greater invisibility because the real battle had not yet begun. His figure flew directly, and then gradually approached the huge shadow under the sea. As the distance closed little by little, Soren's expression gradually became serious. When he could clearly see the huge whale in front of him, a strange light suddenly appeared in his eyes. Dominate sea creature. For a moment, he felt dizzy. Soren seemed to feel a kind of resistance, but this resistance was nothing at all. He controlled the consciousness of the creature in front of him. Domination was successful. Soren's mouth showed a cruel smile. His figure appeared because of the spell-like ability. Many pirates were shocked and afraid of him in the air. In the distance, there was the sound of the wizard inhaling. But what made them even more afraid was that the huge shadow in the sea began to rise, and then directly emerged on the surface of the water. Soren fell from the air, and then stood on the head of the whale. How is this possible? A large group of pirates widened their eyes, and they were almost dumbfounded. On the deck of the warship, a pirate with a fierce face was also full of disbelief. He murmured, "How is it possible? How can he control my pet?" Soren glanced at the enemy in the distance. Then he gently snapped his fingers, and the huge whale under his feet began to turn around, and then turned around and rushed to Narwhal's clipper ship. "I like this feeling." Soren had a smile on his face, and his hair that had not been cut for a long time was dancing in the wind. The huge whale began to accelerate, and directly hit the clipper ships that were more than 10 meters long. The huge whale approached like a shadow, and in an instant, the nearest clipper ship was overturned, and then there was the sound of splashing water, and some pirates died directly. "Run! Jump off the ship!" No one knew who shouted, but the fastest pirates all jumped into the sea. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning of the nightmare. Soren's figure disappeared again, and at the same time, he flew directly. The huge killer whale crushed all the way, and then dived into the sea. After overturning a large number of clipper ships in succession, it opened its bloody mouth and swallowed the unlucky pirates who jumped into the sea one by one. This was the sea. It was simply a dream to kill the killer whale in the sea with their strength. Charge! Kill them all. Kill Narwhal. On the distant warship, there was a burst of excited howls. This group of trash was absolutely not capable of fighting a head-on battle, but if they were allowed to beat a drowning dog, these guys would definitely be more energetic than the other. After Soren dominated the killer whale, he directly reversed the situation. Even an idiot could see that the wizard's strength was unfathomable. Get ready to fight. Adele raised her long sword, and her fiery red long hair fluttered in the wind. She looked gorgeous and full of heroism. She shouted, "All the spoils of war on the enemy are yours. Whoever dares to take half a step back, I will kill him." Another wave of howls rang out. It seemed that she also knew what could inspire the fighting spirit of this group of old foxes. Chapter 212. Killer whales were the overlords of the sea creatures. Their food even included great white sharks. Except for those mutated sea monsters, there were not many sea creatures that could threaten their existence. In the sea, even shark men and nagas would not easily provoke killer whales. Although they were only grade 2 creatures, their adult size could reach about 10 meters. A small group of killer whales would even prey on sharks and koh-tao fishmen. They had high animal intelligence. A small group of killer whales dared to fight against a giant octopus, and the one in front of him had no problem fighting a sea monster alone. Soren's figure stopped in the air. The huge killer whale directly overturned most of the clippers, and even the warships were shaken by it. The pirates on the deck attacked it, but the arrows and throwing weapons could only pass through its skin and get stuck in its fat. Large sea creatures were born with a basic HP of 12. Even if all the characteristics were deducted, it still had the HP of a grade 3 barbarian. Soren might have felt that the killer whale in front of him was still useful, so he did not let it directly die in the opponent's attack. The killer whale gradually sank to the bottom of the sea. The seawater reduced the power of the arrows and throwing weapons, and it began to hunt those unlucky people who fell into the sea. There was panic on the deck. However, under the command of Narwhal, the gunners began to get into position. Most of the pirates were involved in alchemy weapons, but the level was only equivalent to around the 19th century. High-end alchemy skills were rarely popular, and the various forces would not allow pirates to have such dangerous weapons, because they could be used to attack cities. Soren's target was Narwhal in front of him. This was a strong warrior, but he seemed to have some special bloodline, and his skin was a bit wrinkled like a fishman. A hybrid human. Pirates were a group of people who liked to try taboos, and Narwhal in front of him had a small amount of marine intelligence. The opponent was quite alert. After Soren's figure disappeared, he looked around vigilantly, and at the same time, he held his weapon tightly. This was a high-grade profession, with a profession level of about 16. Although he had not entered the legendary realm, he was still a very difficult enemy. He had rich combat experience, and always looked around, as if he had the experience of dealing with invisible enemies before. Knowledge, creature Ko Tao fishmen can see through invisibility. The legendary professionals were relatively scattered. Among the pirates, the only ones who had reached the legendary realm were the pirate kings of the major seas. So as long as Soren could kill the narwhal in front of him, these enemies would be defeated. Patter. There was a very slight noise. The sound of Soren landing on the deck was quickly covered by the sound of the pirates' panic. He paid a little attention to the surroundings, and then controlled the killer whale to collide with the pirate ship from the bottom of the sea. The hull immediately shook a little. Then, Soren took advantage of this opportunity to move at high speed and went directly behind the enemy. His scimitar drew a cold light that was invisible to the naked eye and instantly pierced Narwhal's heart. Clang! Soren's figure was slightly exposed. He was wearing ordinary clothes on the outside, but he was wearing thin tungsten steel armor on the inside. Pirates rarely wore heavy armor due to the special battlefield. This was mainly because they needed the ability to jump when fighting on a ship. At the same time, it was very difficult to swim while wearing armor when falling into the sea. This tungsten steel armor seemed to be a rare grade equipment. It belonged to the half-body type of armor, and its defensive ability was almost comparable to a full-body armor. As the pirate leader of Snake Island, Narwhal's equipment seemed to be pretty good. Go to hell. When Soren's figure was slightly exposed, Narwhal roared and found his position in an instant. At the same time, he waved his long sword and slashed horizontally. The sword was like a half-moon. The other party's attack power was fierce. After slightly locking Soren's position, he continued to slash. He did not give him any chance at all. Even if there were other pirates in front of him, Narwhal did not even blink his eyes and directly slashed at them with his sword. The pirates who were blocking the way died with their eyes wide open. They were cut in half by Narwhal on the spot. Blood and intestines gushed out, and at the same time, a little shallow footprints were revealed. Haha! You can't escape. Narwhal did not know why a wizard wanted to fight with him in close combat, but he knew that the opportunity to kill him had come. He actually let out a wild roar, and suddenly began to spin. Slam! Slash! The target of Narwhal's attack was not only limited to Soren, but also the nearby subordinates were beheaded by him. More and more blood splashed on the deck, and Soren's footprints became more and more obvious as he moved at high speed. Although the effect of his greater invisibility was still there, the blood had exposed his position. It was impossible for him to step on the blood without leaving a trace. Sword form, tidal slash. The continuous attacks forced Soren to have nowhere to hide, and at the same time, it scared the other pirates away. It seemed that they were afraid of dying under their leader's sword. Narwhal seemed to have launched a certain kind of spell ability. He may have taken on a lower profession, or it may be because of the spell-like attack brought by his bloodline. As he slashed with his sword, there was a tide-like surge of energy, which seemed to be the special ability of the Quatones. Dang! Dang! Soren finally had no way to retreat. He suddenly raised his sword to block the enemy's attack. At the same time, a trace of his figure was revealed. Soren silently looked at the enemy in front of him. It seemed that he did not expect that the enemy would use this method to force him to reveal himself. This was really a difficult character to deal with. The huge force from the sword made Soren slide back on the deck. As he stepped on the cabin door panel, his figure gradually became translucent. The effect of greater invisibility had weakened. A wave of crossbow bolts shot over. Soren's skin was covered with a layer of stone skin at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then he suddenly shouted, bent his waist and bounced his legs to fly 10 meters high. The enemy had surrounded him. The rhythm of the battle seemed to be a little out of control. Soren found that in the case of fighting against dozens of enemies alone, there was still a possibility of accidents. Sure enough, it was still dangerous to fight a group of people alone. However, accidents were still under his control. Soren took a deep breath in midair, and when he opened his eyes, his pupils had turned into a blood-red color. The bones of his whole body made a crackling sound, and almost his whole body expanded. His strong muscles were like marble sculptures. He could still twist his body and swing his sword at a nearby enemy while in the air. Plop! A corpse was cut diagonally from the shoulder to the waist. When the legendary curved sword icing death was retracted, there was a slight frost on the corpse. Slaughter form. Just at the moment when Soren transformed into Slaughter, Vivian in the distance suddenly floated up. She was still sleeping, but a strange tattoo appeared on the side of her face. Her beautiful long hair fluttered in the wind. She was surrounded by a powerful force field. Everything in the whole room was strangely suspended. Her petite body stayed in the air like this, and the corner of her mouth showed a strange smile. Whirlwind slash. In Slaughter form, Soren's strength was enhanced to 20 points, and dexterity was enhanced to 25 points. At this moment, he was simply a killing machine. Only a cold light could be seen from his curved sword. His translucent figure was covered by a hazy shadow, and he moved at high speed like a shadow. This was an ability that only legendary rogues could have. 25 points of extraordinary dexterity was the legendary dexterity. The Slaughter form provided him with a total of 10 points of attribute bonus, which was equivalent to 20 profession levels of free attribute. 15 seconds. When Soren swung his sword at Narwhal in front of him, there were already 6 corpses behind him. Half of them were beheaded, and the other half were cut in half at the waist. This kind of sword attack really needed to be supported by strength. Dang dang dang. Narwhal, who initially forced Soren to retreat, was full of fear. In front of his eyes were all weak sword lights that were difficult to catch with the naked eye. The opponent's strength was not much different from his, but his dexterity completely suppressed him. If it weren't for the extraordinary tungsten steel armor, Narwhal's stomach would have been cut open in the first round of attacks. But now the injuries on his body were increasing rapidly. There were still many places that the armor could not protect. He had already left 5 scars in a row while blocking. A series of data appeared crazily, launched beheading attack. Beheading successful. Target dead. You have learned something in the battle. You have gained some information about sword form, beheading. Launched waist/attack. Waist/successful. Target dead. You have learned something in the battle. You have gained some information about sword form, waist/. Block successful. You have learned something in the battle. You have gained some information about the ability, dual-wielding defense. Battle experience. With the repeated battles and killings, you have gradually mastered some of the skills of dual-wielding. When the skills have accumulated to a certain extent, you will understand a new ability. Dang dang dang. Soren in the slaughter form was simply unstoppable. While he was attacking Narwhal at high speed, he was also harvesting the lives of the nearby pirates. In just a moment, there were more than a dozen corpses around him. Narwhal in front of him was covered in blood. Although it was not a fatal wound because of the armor protection, it still made him accumulate to a state of serious injury. Narwhal gasped violently. His eyes were full of despair and fear because he found that the enemy was a profession close to the legendary realm. He had no hope of winning against such an existence. Sword form, spinning strike. Soren's figure suddenly rushed out and spun around at an amazing speed. It was the move that Adele Isabel used. With the cold light of the curved sword, Narwhal's head flew directly and then fell to the ground with a bang. Soren's eyes were full of killing intent. He kicked the headless body in front of him, then showed a bloodthirsty smile and turned to look at the other pirates. Plop. No one knew who knelt down first, but then the pirates threw away their weapons. Their eyes were full of horror and fear. They trembled under Soren's gaze. One by one, they knelt on the deck and buried their heads deep in the ground. They were afraid. They were afraid. Chapter 213. Fear was that simple. Everyone had the desire to survive. If there was no possibility of defeating the enemy, and they lost the hope of escaping, their will would be destroyed by fear in just a few minutes. Even soldiers with strong beliefs would surrender in a hopeless war. Soren's strength had already made them fearful. In just a few minutes, he had killed 20 or 30 people, even their leader, Narwhal, had been killed. Under the pirate ship were wandering killer whales. They jumped into the sea to escape, but in the end, they were just feeding the whales. Fear did not only come from killing, but also from the fear of the unknown. These pirates did not know how strong Soren was, how many tricks he had, and who he was. They knew almost nothing about the existence in front of them. They only knew that when he slaughtered them, they were like ants. The other party was a terrible existence who was used to killing. This kind of person would not even blink when taking lives. If he wanted to, he could even kill everyone on this ship with a smile on his face, as easy as wiping away dust. Charge. Kill them all. Narwhal is already dead. The warships behind gradually approached, and there were also thugs who had been motivated by the reward. Unfortunately, by the time they got close, the battle was basically over. Soren's thin figure stood at the bow of the ship, his whole body shrouded in a dark red cloak. He was gently wiping the blood on his curved sword. In front of him was a large group of enemies who had dropped their weapons and knelt down. This scene shocked the others. Even Adele was in disbelief because it had only taken 10 minutes from the beginning to now. She encouraged the morale of the group of bastards, and then gradually sailed the ship closer, and then the battle here was over. Pick up those guys in the sea. There were still pirates in the sea begging for mercy. Soren did not let the killer whales kill them. Adele began to order the others to throw down the ropes, and she looked at Soren in amazement. This man was stronger than she had imagined. The others came to the ship one after another, and it seemed that one of them was not very clean. Because there were people in front of him, he secretly squatted down and searched the bodies. Then he took out a money bag and was ready to put it in his pocket when no one noticed. Solen's face was a little gloomy, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Get out of my way. He suddenly shouted, scaring the others around him. Even Adele couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Soren picked up a short spear and threw it at the sneaky guy. Bang! Blood splattered everywhere. That guy was nailed to the deck by the short spear, but because it only pierced through his abdomen, he didn't die immediately. Soren walked over with a cold expression, and then took out a money pouch from the man's pocket. He looked at the others with a murderous gaze, causing them to tremble slightly and take a few steps back. Soren then said in a low voice, "All the spoils of war must be collected together, and then after the battle, I will give you the rewards you deserve." There is only one outcome for such sneaky behavior. Soren didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. He didn't even listen to the guy's pleas and cut off his head. Blood spurted out. The decapitated head rolled out, scaring the others into taking a few steps back. Soren then looked down at everyone in front of him and roared, "I don't care who you are. I also don't care what the rules were before. Now that you are my subordinates, you must act according to my rules. I won't be stingy with the rewards you deserve, but if anyone dares to disobey my orders, I will give them an unimaginable punishment." Soren casually threw the money pouch to the half-elf vice-captain, and at the same time said in a low voice, "Let them clean up the battlefield, and give them 50% of the spoils of war. In a while, we will attack Snake Island, kill anyone who doesn't dare to fight and feed them to the fish." The half-elf vice-captain's eyes seemed to have a trace of excitement. He silently nodded, and then began to assign people to clean up the spoils of war. This was a big shot that could truly rise among the pirates of the South Coast. Although he admitted that Adele's strength wasn't weak, her style of doing things wasn't as cold and domineering as this sire in front of him. He could even feel that this sire in front of him didn't just want these little things. He might become an existence like a pirate king, or even surpass the 3 legendary pirate kings. "Submit to me. Be loyal to me." Soren walked in front of a bearded pirate kneeling on the deck, and said in a cold voice, "Serve me, and I will give you the rewards you deserve." Hesitation, silence, and fear. The bearded pirate kneeling in front of Soren seemed to hesitate for a moment. Although he had surrendered and given up resistance, he didn't think that he would surrender to the enemy so soon. Pirates also had their own rules. Just a moment ago, he had drawn his sword, and now he was going to surrender to the enemy? He was obviously hesitant. Unfortunately, Soren wasn't interested in waiting for him to understand. A cold light flashed, and then a head fell to the ground. A large amount of blood gushed out and spilled on the deck. He didn't even look at the corpse, and then walked in front of the second person, and said in a deep voice, "Submit to me, be loyal to me." He didn't even bother to say the rest. That guy seemed to be scared silly. A bloody head fell to the ground, and a lot of blood sprayed on his body. It seemed that he couldn't react in time. Plop. Soren's patience seemed to be limited at this moment. Another light flashed in his hand, and then the second head fell to the ground. The headless corpse fell to the deck, and the smell of blood was very strong. "Submit to me." Soren's words became fewer and fewer, and the expression on his face became colder and colder. It was as if he was a terrible demon, and could kill everyone on the ship at any time. I am willing to be loyal to you." The third pirate finally became smarter. He almost stuttered as he shouted, and then his whole body was covered in cold sweat. It had only been 10 seconds, and the first one was beheaded because he hesitated. The second one was beheaded because he was half a beat slower. He didn't dare to think too much, and chose to be loyal without hesitation. He was even sure that if he answered a few seconds later, his head would have been chopped off. Very good. A smile finally appeared at the corner of Soren's mouth, and he walked directly to the fourth person. The next step was much easier. Soren only gave each person 3 seconds to answer, and if he didn't get the answer he wanted, he would mercilessly slash. He used a total of 3 minutes to turn all the captives into his subordinates, and the rest were thrown into the sea as corpses. Perhaps these people didn't have much loyalty, but Soren didn't care too much. He didn't need their loyalty, as long as they knew what fear and respect was. The original people will be handed over to the vice-captain, and these guys will be led by you. Soren looked at Adele in front of him. Her eyes were slightly shining, and her gaze seemed to be a little fanatical. There seemed to be an indescribable emotion in her eyes. This group of pirates who surrendered were stronger, and Adele had to be personally subdued. Soren didn't plan to waste too much time on these pirates. He just wanted to let these pirates know that he was standing behind Adele, and that they would feel fear when they thought of his existence. This was the simplest and most effective way to manage them in a short period of time. Give them weapons. Soren looked at the others indifferently, and said in a deep voice, the other half of the spoils will be given to them as well, and we will go directly to Snake Island. After saying that, he came in front of the half-elf first mate, looked at him and said, "What is your name?" The half-elf first mate looked a little excited, with fear and fanaticism, and said in a low voice, "Sir, my name is Casa." "Very good." Soren nodded lightly and said, "Casa, from now on, this ship will be under your command. Let's go to Snake Island." The pirates on the ship moved in a panic, and the collected spoils were directly distributed. Soren didn't give them much time to think. Adele turned over Narwhal's body, then took the tungsten steel armor and other things from his body. She handed them to Soren with a respectful expression and said, "Sir, these are the things from Narwhal, and some of them are very useful." Soren glanced at them slightly. The things on Narwhal's body were good, but the most valuable thing was the tungsten steel armor. This half-body armor could almost be exchanged for a manner. Unfortunately, Soren couldn't wear armor. In order to maintain flexibility, rogues could only wear leather armor at most. Wearing this tungsten steel armor would only affect his fighting and spellcasting. Since he had stone skin, he didn't even wear leather armor much. He glanced at Adele in front of him, reached out and took the multidimensional bag, and then said in a deep voice, "You wear this armor, and count the other things. See if there are any goods in the cabin." "Yes." Adele bowed and nodded. This series of thunderous means not only shocked the pirates, but also made the original crew and Adele gradually understand the awe and obedience. Soren glanced at the others, then gently jumped and landed on the huge killer whale. He reached out and stroked the behemoth, then poured a bottle of healing potion into its mouth. This sea creature seemed to have a certain amount of intelligence. It was hit by a crossbow and javelin in the battle, so it needed to be treated. Soren didn't want to see it bleed to death like this. Maybe it would be useful in the future. Soren's time was still very tight. His plan was to help Adele rise on the south coast in 7 days, so he had to speed up his pace. The next target was Snake Island. Chapter 2:14. Snake Island was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, and there was a natural harbor in the lee side. This harbor had been artificially developed and could dock 3 to 5 warships. It had been contested by many pirate forces for a long time. Narwhal had only taken over this place in recent years. He was originally an inconspicuous pirate. Because he betrayed his former leader, he rose to power. In just a few years, he had suppressed and divided other pirate forces. At the same time, he robbed his fellow pirates to strengthen his own financial resources. The most important thing for pirates was profit. Whoever could lead them to eat and drink would be able to get their support. Narwhal was able to take over Snake Island because he had swallowed a lot of small pirates and gradually became a famous pirate leader. This was a bit similar to the bandits in the desert. A small group of bandits gradually grew into a large group and finally became one of the top forces in the desert. The harbor of Snake Island was relatively simple. There were pirates who stayed behind nearby. Basically, pirates took turns to go out to sea. The nest definitely needed someone to stay behind. Otherwise, if the enemy sneaked in and set fire to it, the mountain stronghold that they had painstakingly built would be burned down. There were also 2 pirate leaders under Narwhal. They were small forces that he had subdued. They belonged to the second-in-command and the third-in-command level. When the pirates who stayed behind saw the ships in the distance, they immediately sent out a signal. Then someone was ready to let them dock at the harbor. These pirates naturally did not know that Narwhal had been slaughtered by Soren. "Carlos. Where's the boss?" A fierce pirate who was missing half of his little finger looked at the bow of the ship and shouted, "Why are you back so soon today?" A young man stepped out from the pirate ship. He had a quick-witted look. He walked to the bow of the ship and shouted, "The boss is on the ship at the back. We were lucky today. We met a group of fat sheep as soon as we went out to sea. The boss took their cargo ship, but it was full of goods. They can't run as fast as us on the sea. The pirate who was missing his little finger took a look and found that there was another ship approaching from behind. Tsk tisk. He looked at the bow of the ship and shouted, "It looks like you got a lot of benefits this time. You must treat me to a drink later." The young man smiled and said, "No problem. Very soon." The pirate ship docked at the port, then a group of people came down. All of them were Narwhal's subordinates. The pirate stationed at the port also came over. The pirate with the missing pinky laughed as he walked towards the young man and patted him on the shoulder. "What do you think? How were the casualties? It looks like none of you are injured. Did he get a lot of benefits? Did you catch any beautiful women?" Hee hee. None of the pirates who came down were injured. Soren could kill most of these people with a single slash. His strength was close to that of a half-legend, and he was qualified to be the leader of a force. Hee hee. The young man smiled and gently moved his hand back. Two people beside him leaned over. He smiled and said, "Women." However, there was a very beautiful one. However. Plop. A dagger pierced into the opponent's waist and directly hit the opponent's kidney. Then two other people rushed over and stuck the target's body in an instant, followed by a flurry of stabs. The young pirate named Carlos had a grim smile on his face. The dagger mercilessly cut the opponent's throat, and then he said in a deep voice, "But you are not qualified to have any ideas. Narwhal is dead. We are loyal to an even more powerful adept. Maybe he will be a new pirate king." The pirate king was only in the legendary realm. These people who surrendered could more or less feel that Soren was close to the legendary level. There was a flash of swords. The pirates who had just gotten off the ship turned on him instantly. Under a sneak attack, they killed the enemies who stayed at the port in a short time. They did not expect that their companions, who had just gone out to sea, would now draw their swords against them. They were shocked by the news of Narwhal's death. They were completely caught off guard and died cleanly on one side. Very good. Soren's figure came down from the deck. He looked at the young man named Carlos and said in a deep voice, "From now on, you are the first mate of this ship. These people will be led by you. Next, prepare to take down Snake Island. Those who are willing to surrender can stay. Those who are not, kill them all." The young man's face showed a hint of joy. He humbly bowed his head and said, "I will not let your excellency down." He made the right bet. Soren's ruthless means from the beginning to the end shocked them. The young man also sensitively perceived an opportunity. That was, except for the red-haired female pirate, this powerful wizard did not have many useful people. If he could prove his value, then he could be put in an important position. The move just now was proposed by him. Soren undoubtedly thought highly of him and directly appointed him as the first mate of the pirate ship. For these pirates, you don't have to overestimate their bottom line. Another warship began to dock. Adele's fiery red hair fluttered in the wind as she jumped directly from the bow. There were also some pirates with good skills. Basically, the main force was close to the second grade, which was equivalent to the strength of the city guards. Adele was wearing a tungsten steel armor. Because her breasts were obviously fuller than ordinary women, with a little bit of the fullness of an Amazon woman, she had to wrap her plump breasts with cloth strips. Otherwise, she would not be able to wear this armor at all. Women's armor was specially made. There would be a naked space in front of the chest. This armor was prepared for men. But even so, Adele was still a little awkward after wearing it. It made people look indescribably strange, but she did not care so much. In a battle, life and death were instantaneous. Who would care so much about whether the armor looked good or not? As long as it could save her life, it was enough. For a woman like her who had a voluptuous upper body and a tall figure, ordinary armor would be awkward to wear. Unless it was custom-made like the Amazon Storm Lord's armor, it wouldn't affect her too much. Soren slowly pulled out his scimitar. A group of pirates who were intimidated by the thunder also pulled out their weapons. Many of them still had hesitation in their eyes, but after noticing Soren's cold gaze, their expressions gradually became firm. This firm determination was not because of anything else, but because they were afraid. They were very sure that if they disobeyed the order, they would be mercilessly beheaded by this sir in front of them. Outside the port, the killer whale was still swimming. They could not escape. They had seen too much death, but they had never seen such a person who killed without batting an eyelid. The heads on the ground had already frightened them. Attack! Soren gave the order in a deep voice, and then the pirates began to move forward. Adele seemed to want to prove her worth, and actually rushed to the front. It seemed that Soren's actions of promoting 2 people in a row today made her feel pressured. Although she was the strongest person besides Soren, she was only around the 4th grade. There were also some 3rd grade leaders among these pirates. If she could not prove her worth, Adele felt that she might be replaced by Soren. The group of pirates began to move forward quickly. There was a camp on Snake Island. It was the old nest built by the narwhal, and there were still hundreds of people left here. Clang! Soren pulled out his scimitar. His figure disappeared into the air, and then he approached the gate of the camp at high speed. In front of him was a wooden wall that was 2 stories high. Soren jumped up lightly, and then mercilessly killed the guard in front of the gate with 1 slash. Thump, thump, thump. Soren waved his 2 scimitars like a gust of wind. Wherever the scimitars pointed, there were broken limbs. The 6 guards in front of the gate were directly beheaded by him. Adele's vigorous figure also appeared behind him. The pirates shouted and rushed in. Behind them was the half-elf Kassa. He brought a group of people to cover the rear. Whoever dared to take a step back would be shot to death by the archers. A massacre began. Soren's eyes were cold and ruthless. He silently counted the number of heads in his heart. At the same time, his figure leaped between the roof and the wooden wall, killing all the archers one by one. After Narwhal was killed, there were only 2 leaders left here. Many of the remaining pirates were caught off guard. They were either captured or killed directly. Are you crazy? You bastards! Are you rebelling? A very strong guy appeared with a heavy axe in his hand. He rushed over with a roar and roared, "Where is Narwhal? Have all of his subordinates gone mad? Why are they attacking their own people? Evade sight. Shadow jump." The answer was a cold light. Soren's figure appeared in the twisted shadow, and then he ended the grade 3 part-time barbarian with 1 slash. Killed in 1 blow. Soren silently pulled the scimitar out of the other's heart, then looked around and slowly said, "Surrender and you will not die. Surrender and you will not die. Surrender and you will not die." Seeing Soren kill the former second-in-command, the group of pirates became more determined to turn against their former companions. They completely realized that Snake Island was going to change its leader. Now, whoever could prove themselves first would be able to sit in a higher position. Carlos' promotion had just aroused their greed. The battle was still going on. Soren silently harvested heads, but they were not the ones on the battlefield, but those who wanted to escape. Soon, more and more enemies began to collapse. Some threw away their weapons directly, and some were still fighting desperately, but their death was only a matter of time. The third in command of Snake Island did not seem to be here, and the people below did not know where he went. These were all small things. After Soren subdued all the pirates, he immediately ordered the warehouse and Narwhal's bedroom to be blocked. Not surprisingly, the most valuable things in the whole Snake Island were here. From now on, the whole Snake Island belonged to his territory, and these pirates would become his claws. They were the first card in his hand to rise overseas. P.S. The leader will update at the end of the month. Fu too is recovering his energy. Chapter 2:15. The ice-cold sea breeze blew in his face. Soren stood on the roof of the stronghold, gazing at the sea in the distance. His expression didn't change at all, as if he was wearing a mask. Only the most attentive people would notice that Soren's fingers were trembling slightly, and his index finger was gently rubbing the blade. There was a strong smell of blood on him, as well as a strong murderous aura. This murderous aura wasn't just empty words, it was the result of a pile of heads. Soren couldn't control his murderous aura. He had killed too many people recently. From the moment he met Adele, to the time he took down Snake Island, Soren had taken too many heads along the way. The repeated killings had bred the ruthlessness in his heart, and this was a battle of wills. Pest pest pest. The slight sound of moving came from not far away. Soren's figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was holding a spotted viper in his hand. This was Snake Island, and there was a large number of vipers. The stronghold was surrounded by a circle of repellent, but for some reason, the vipers behind them could still run in. The vipers here were difficult to completely eliminate, because there was a snake cave behind them. It would take a lot of casualties to clean up these vipers. Soren used 2 fingers to pinch the viper's head, and the viper in his palm wrapped its body around his arm, and then began to tighten little by little. Soren felt a cold touch on his arm, but he still silently gazed into the distance, as if something in the sea was attracting him. Only when he looked away from the sea did a trace of hidden ruthlessness appear in his eyes, and his pupils faintly glowed with a bloody light. The slaughter form had been removed, and he had satisfied the bloodthirst of the slaughter form, but it seemed that even more thirst was born. A sharp glint of the blade appeared. Soren cut open the viper's body with a flip of his hand, and then stretched out his fingers to pinch out the snake's gallbladder. He raised his hand and put the gallbladder into his mouth, gently chewing it. An unbearable bitter taste appeared, and Soren's mouth twitched slightly. He couldn't help but frown, but he still chewed slowly until the bitter taste in his mouth faded, and then he slowly swallowed. Patter. He casually tossed away the snake's corpse and continued to stare at the distant sea. Special ability, Desire for Slaughter. After transforming into a slaughterer, you will be affected by the desire to slaughter. You will become extremely sensitive to fresh blood, and your senses towards anything related to slaughter will be strengthened. However, after transforming into a slaughterer, you must kill at least 4 targets to satisfy your desire for slaughter. Otherwise, you will enter a state of madness. This thirst for slaughter will increase with the number of times you transform. This was the special ability of the slaughter transformation. If he remembered correctly, after killing the son of fear the first time he transformed into a slaughterer, he only needed 2 heads to satisfy his desire for slaughter. 1, 2, 4. Soren realized that the number of slaughter cravings he needed to satisfy after transforming into a slaughterer was increasing exponentially. Although it was only 4 at the moment, at this rate, the more times he transformed, the higher the number of slaughter cravings he needed to satisfy. In the end, the number of slaughter cravings he needed to satisfy would increase exponentially. This ability could greatly increase his strength, but it also seemed to bring him closer and closer to a true slaughterer. Light footsteps could be heard. Adele Isabella's figure appeared not far away. After the battle, she took off her armor and temporarily freed her full chest. The feeling of being tied up with cloth strips was not good at all. She looked at Soren in the distance, and her whole body trembled. Then her eyes were in a trance, as if she suddenly saw the shadow of her father in him. For a while, her father also liked to stand and look at the sea like this, as if there was too much meaning in the sea. The sea was a fascinating place. Her father lived almost all his life on the sea. He used to be a notorious and ruthless pirate, but since she was his daughter, he gradually became more restrained. It was said that after he killed his enemies, he liked to hang their bodies on the mast or nail them to a wooden frame for the sea eagles to eat. He almost never left anyone alive on the merchant ships he plundered, but since she was sensible, she seemed to have never seen her father do this again. This change became even more obvious after her mother's death. That night, she knew that her father knelt in the temple and repented for the whole night. Her father went to the temple many times because he was a believer of the sea goddess, but in the past, he sacrificed to the gods and prayed for blessings. In Adele's memory, her father seemed to have never repented in the temple. His mother should have hated him. Even at the moment of her death, she still hated him because he killed his mother's husband and then forcibly kidnapped his mother back. But her father should have loved her, because in Adele's memory, he seemed to have never been close to any other woman except her mother. From that time on, her father killed fewer and fewer people, and often did not kill innocent people after robbing merchant ships. Every week, he would go to the temple to repent. No one knew what he was repenting for, but Adele knew that he would always feel guilty for her mother. Maybe things should have passed like this. Unfortunately, reality still gave them a merciless blow. His repentance and kindness were regarded as weakness by other pirates, and more people began to feel dissatisfied with him. Eventually, some people began to rebel against him and conspire to overthrow him. It wasn't until the moment when her father was besieged and killed by hundreds of people that Adele saw his fierceness and bravery. The man called Killer Whale had not become weak. He fought bravely in the crowd like a ferocious tiger. In the end, he forcefully opened up a path for her. Even until the moment of his death, he did not fall. This might be a father's love. After her mother's death, her father, who rarely killed people, really showed his strength when he killed a way out for her. He was still the notorious pirate who killed people like flies. Those who speculated that he had become weak because of old age all recalled his original bravery and cruelty at that moment. Her father died in battle. He died in battle to protect her. Many people died that night. Wherever her father's knife went, heads rolled. He was stronger than before, and even touched the edge of the legendary realm. But Adele still couldn't understand his thoughts. She didn't understand why her father didn't show his strength in advance. As long as he killed a little, he could suppress the rebellious hearts of others. Why was he willing to draw his sword and fight until the last moment? Adele couldn't understand all this. But she still told herself in her heart not to be weak, because weakness would be defeated by cruel reality. She had many memories of her father. But the most memorable was the appearance of her father standing on a high place overlooking the sea. That image overlapped with Soren in front of her, and inexplicably made her feel the similarity between the two people. Perhaps in the heart of the man in front of her, there was also something that he regarded as more precious than his own life. The only difference was, her father put down the knife, and he picked it up. Adele still knew nothing about the man in front of her. All her feelings were just a woman's intuition. The man in front of her seemed to notice her arrival. He withdrew his gaze from the sea in the distance, then turned around and looked at her lightly. He slowly said, "Finished counting?" "Yes." Adele bowed slightly to show her respect and said, "We found 2 boxes of gold and jewelry in the mountain stronghold. Basically, we have searched all the places with hidden compartments. There are a lot of goods in the warehouse, but they need to be transported out. The total value should be about 23,000 gold dirhams, of which about 8,000 gold dirhams can be spent directly. The rest are all valuable items and goods." Soren nodded gently. He looked at the woman in front of him with satisfaction and ordered, "All those who participated in the battle will be rewarded with 15 kindler. Let them eat all the meat in the warehouse, but no one is allowed to drink. You count the goods that are easy to sell, and then take 5,000 kindler. Tomorrow morning, take a group of people to Port Tylon. Sell all the goods, even if the price is low. Then you can recruit people. These funds should be enough for you to recruit a group of desperados. I won't stay here for too long. In 3 days, we will destroy the sea wolves in Shipwreck Bay. As for how to control these guys, I think you should know how to do it. Go on." Soren waved his hand gently. After all, there were only a few people in this world who could read. There were many good fighters among the pirates, but there were not many who could read or learn. The woman in front of him was not bad. She received part of the aristocratic education from her mother. In knowledge, trade, and management, she was better than other pirates. The only thing she lacked at present was strength. As a woman, she needed more strength to suppress these rebellious pirates. Being only grade 4 was not enough. She needed to be at least a quasi-legendary. However, she still had Soren behind her. As long as the pirates knew that there was a mysterious and terrifying existence behind everything, they would not dare to act recklessly because of fear in their hearts. because Soren's prestige was built on their heads. But the number of heads now was not enough. Soren had to use more heads to build up his prestige, so that the pirates would tremble when they thought of him. This way, Soren would not go to the outer islands and destroy everything carefully arranged here. Adele was only the leader on the surface. Soren had to use thunderous means to intimidate them. Kill and reward. This was only the simplest way to control them. P.S. I wrote this chapter all morning. I don't know how it is. I should have done my best. The title of the chapter is a bit poetic, but I really thought about it for a long time. Chapter 2:16. Port Tylon, Shark Tavern. There were many taverns in this coastal transit area, but these taverns were divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades. Many of them belonged to the gray area, and even the local residents would not enter them. Shark Tavern happened to be one of them. It was opened in a somewhat remote and hidden area. There was a tiger shark sign hanging at the door. If one was not familiar with the place, one would not notice it at all. This was a very special tavern. Ordinary people would not come here. The people here were pirates and outlaws. After entering the tavern, one would find that the decoration inside was unexpectedly luxurious. It was almost comparable to a high-end restaurant. The maids in charge of serving them were young and beautiful. From time to time, one could hear the screams caused by the pirates taking advantage of them. Then, there was a roar of laughter. There were prostitutes, liquor, intelligence, and underground boxing. Every month, there would be an underground boxing match here at a specific time. There were almost no rules in the process. The match would only end when one side died. Occasionally, there would be armed combat matches. Gambling was one of the sources of income for the tavern. Near the door, there were 2 or 3 pirates sitting next to drinking. One of them had a sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks and reached out to touch the barmaids, but when she passed by, the barmaid turned around and glared at him, then curled her lips and said, "3 Kindler. If you can afford it, let's go to the back." So expensive. The pirate with a sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks suddenly looked embarrassed. He wanted to curse, but he looked at the bar with some fear. Such a bar had a very solid foundation. Pirates like them, who were not qualified, would be destroyed easily. His companions next to him couldn't help but laugh. The pirate with a sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks was a little angry. One of them waved his hand and said, "Skinny monkey is just a little itchy. But don't touch here." Last time, a guy was bold enough to touch the lady bosses, but in the end, his hand was chopped off. The beautiful barmaid curled her lips and seemed to say something like, "Poor man, don't touch if you don't have money." Ahem. The pirate with a sharp mouth and monkey-like cheeks coughed. Although he was angry, he did not have the courage to make trouble here. He could not help but change the topic and said, "Right. Have you heard? Narwhal had been killed. Even Snake Island has been taken down." This sentence silenced the people nearby, and then someone said in astonishment, "Narwhal is dead? Who killed him? No one in this area could take down his Snake Island, right? Did he provoke the Pirate King recklessly?" All the pirates had to pay tribute to the Pirate King. The 3 pirate kings had all ceded islands to become kings, dividing the sea near the south coast. Everything that belonged to them had to be handed over for worship. Narwhal should not be so reckless as to provoke the Pirate King, and there was no need for the Pirate King to deal with such a small character. But other than the Pirate King, they really couldn't think of anyone who could kill Narwhal. After all, he was also a smooth and slick character. He had some reputation among the pirates. There were not many people who could kill him silently. I heard it was destroyed by a woman. The skinny man saw that everyone was listening attentively, and he could not help but keep them in suspense until the person next to him impatiently ordered him a glass of wine. He then said with a smile, "I heard it was the daughter of Killer Whale. That old ghost was also notorious. I didn't expect that the daughter he gave birth to was not simple. It is said that she is a first-class beauty. Hee hee. No. One of the pirates with a scar on the side of his face slammed the table, and then said in a deep voice, I have seen Killer Whale's daughter, a woman with fiery red hair. That woman is beautiful, but her skills are about the same level as Narwhal. She doesn't have as many hands as Narwhal, and she doesn't have as many ship cannons as Narwhal. How could she kill Narwhal and take down Snake Island? Moreover, Narwhal also raised a great thing. That thing can overturn the woman's ship in the sea. This was obviously a well-informed guy. The skinny man's face was obviously a little embarrassed. Seeing everyone else nodding, he could not help but say loudly, of course, it's not just this woman. There is also a very mysterious sir behind her. That sir is the key to killing Narwhal. It is said that he killed Narwhal and his men alone, and then attacked Snake Island on the same day. Sir. When they heard this title, the others could not help but be shocked. Among the pirates, this title would not be used indiscriminately. At most, they would be called captain. Those who could use sir were basically close to the strength of a legendary profession. Would such an existence have nothing to do with pirates? Was he planning to compete for the throne of the Pirate King? A legendary profession was a big shot everywhere. Hee hee. The skinny man seemed to be very satisfied with the expressions of the others, and whispered, I heard that Killer Whale's daughter has begun to recruit people. It seems that she intends to unify the nearby waters in one breath. As long as you join, you will have to work for 10 kindlers. Many small pirates in the vicinity have been uneasy. I heard that OL, Sea Dog and Sword Fong Fish have already gone to Snake Island to express their goodwill. They are afraid that the other party will destroy them in one breath. I heard that sir is quite amazing. His means are ruthless and he kills people like scything flax. He tamed all those unruly guys in one day. Narwhal's former men are now honest. There was dead silence in the tavern. Even the landlady in front of the bar could not help but listen quietly. One of the big men seemed to be a little unconvinced. He said in a deep voice, You've been talking for a long time. Who is that, sir? What is his name? Since he intends to intervene in the nearby waters, it's impossible that he didn't even show his name, right? Is he going to put Killer Whale's daughter on the table? That can't suppress the pirate leaders of all places. The skinny man's eyes moved a little, and his expression seemed a little strange. He lowered his voice and said, No one knows who that sir is, but he seems to like to be called Throat Cutter. Throat Cutter. There was a sound of gasps in the tavern. Even the landlady who was wiping the table in front of the bar trembled, and then gradually returned to normal. As for the others, they were obviously frightened. Some of them even turned slightly pale. Obviously, they were more familiar with this name. During this period of time, there were countless casualties in Port Tylon. There were all kinds of bloody fights for interests, and the cause of all this was the legendary Throat Cutter. Moreover, his identity was also linked to the Sea Temple and the ghost ship. These 2 points together represented both powerful strength and the fear of death. The skinny man did not seem to expect such a result. He may have gone to sea some time ago and did not come back, so he did not expect that after he said the name, Throat Cutter, the tavern would become so dead silent. But there was still an inexplicable smile on his face, and his fingertips were gently playing with a kindler. Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. In this magnificent palace, Princess Royal sat on the throne like a queen. Her long silver hair was coiled into a graceful and noble bun, and she wore a light blue crystal dress. She silently looked at a woman covered in a cloak under the throne. There were wisps of thin ice around the mysterious woman, which began to spread from her feet, but only stayed in an area of 3 meters around her. Princess Royal shook her head gently, and then slowly said, I didn't expect your excellency to come here. But I have to refuse your excellency's proposal, although your proposal is very tempting. But I have to stay and protect Arendelle. I have a premonition that an unprecedented catastrophe is coming. Besides, your proposal is really difficult to achieve. He is the creator of that world. Even if you and I join forces, we can't defeat him. Under the throne. The woman covered in a cloak slowly said, "Does your majesty really not want to get out of the current predicament at all? Our enemy is not as powerful as we believe. As long as you and I join forces, we have a chance of winning." Princess Royal still hesitated and said softly, "But after all, he is the creator of that world. That world is his kingdom. Our hope of victory is too small." The mysterious woman could not help but chuckle, and then said, "Creator?" She gently raised her palm, and there seemed to be strange scales on her skin. As she turned her hands slightly, the water vapor in the nearby air began to gather, and then turned into a pool of clear water floating in the air. "Your Majesty, did I create water?" Princess Royal was silent, and there seemed to be a trace of doubt in her mind. The mysterious woman moved her fingers again, and the clear water in front of her turned into ice. Soon a huge ice block emerged. "Your Majesty, did I create ice?" Princess Royal was still silent, but her expression seemed to change slightly. The mysterious woman snapped her fingers, and the ice in front of her changed rapidly. It was reconstructing at an astonishing speed, and it gradually separated and reassembled. Soon, a 5-foot-wide model of a city made of ice appeared. All the buildings and sculptures in it were abnormally lifelike and exquisite. The skill of this spell control was so amazing that even Princess Royal could not help but be surprised. Of course, it was just surprise. She had always thought that only she could control ice and snow to such an extent. "Your Majesty, does this count as creating a city?" The mysterious woman continued to ask, and Princess Royal was still silent. She raised her hand, and a strange light appeared. Humans actually appeared on the city model made of ice, but they were made of ice. They were very small, and they moved about on the city model made of ice, just like ordinary city residents. Princess Royal's face showed a trace of shock. The other party was very strong. It seemed that they were just a little weaker than her. The mysterious woman seemed to be a little tired. She panted slightly, and then waved her hand gently. The ice city disappeared, and the figures on it disappeared. The ice block turned into a pool of clear water, and the clear water gradually turned into floating elements in the air. She sighed and said, "Your Majesty, creation does not mean creation. Creation might not be creating something out of nothing. It might just be changing its appearance. Elements become water, water becomes ice becomes a city, and living beings appear in the city. Everything is still the same, but we have changed the form of energy. The Creator is not as powerful as you think. Moreover, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Do you want to always be like this? Humans are not humans, gods are not gods, and you can't even control your own power." The mysterious woman bowed slightly to show her respect, and then slowly said, "Your Majesty, I hope you can consider my proposal. I will stay in Arendelle for 3 days. If you are willing to cooperate with me, I will be waiting for you at any time." She turned and left slowly. Princess Royal watched her figure disappear until the mysterious woman had completely gone out. Then she gently took off her gloves, raised her hand, and snapped her fingers. A piece of water vapor turned into a pool of clear water, and ice emerged little by little in the clear water. The structure of the ice gradually changed and turned into a model of a city about 10 feet tall, the most striking of which was a magnificent palace. More and more exquisite buildings appeared in the ice. Figures made of ice appeared one after another. Tens of thousands of figures moved about in this small city. On the throne in the palace, there seemed to be a high and mighty queen sitting on the throne. This was Arendelle. It was exactly the same as Arendelle in the real world. Princess Royal could not help but fall into deep thought. She waved her hand gently. The city made entirely of ice in front of her dissipated with the wind, as if it had never existed at all. P.S. I don't know if Princess Royal's strength will scare you. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.